Before we begin, please leave a like and write any comment below. It really helps the channel grow and allows more people to discover these stories. Thank you for your support. Now let's begin. My first night back on duty, and it already felt like the beginning of some small-town horror story. It was 1993, and I was parked on the side of a dirt road in Wainwright, North Dakota. Population 897. The kind of place where everyone knew your name and you couldn't get a burger without someone asking about your family. I loved the peace and quiet. That's why I never left. It's not like I was some big city cop looking to get out of the hustle. No, I just wanted things simple. Easy. My name's Terry Dillon, and I've been with the Wainwright Police Department for 11 years now. I've seen my fair share of bar fights and farm disputes, but nothing too serious. Some drunk guy who wants to throw hands because someone looked at his truck funny, or a farmer accusing his neighbor of stealing his chickens. The closest thing we had to excitement was the annual county fair, but that night was different. I got a call from dispatch around 11 p.m. Madeline, our dispatcher, sounded off, nervous even. The static of the radio couldn't hide the tremor in her voice. "Terry, we've got a situation," she said. "Report of a missing couple from the next town over, staying at a cabin in the woods." Missing people weren't exactly common in these parts, and tourists even less so. Why someone would pick North Dakota for a vacation, I'll never know. But hey, people are weird. "Cabin's up by the old logging road," Madeline had said. "Apparently no one's seen or heard from them in 3 days." 3 days? I asked, squinting through the windshield into the darkness, watching as moths fluttered against the headlights. "And no one thought to report it earlier?" "Their friends got worried when they didn't come back," she replied, a crackle in her voice. "Figured they'd just lost track of time." "You know how people are up there." I sighed and put the truck in drive. Wainwright's woods were dense, but not the kind of place you get lost in easily. Unless, of course, you wandered too deep. Even then you'd hit a road sooner or later. The idea that 2 people had just vanished didn't sit right with me. The logging road was about 15 miles outside of town, near where the old mill used to operate back in the 70s. I knew the area well. As a kid, I'd gone camping there with my dad, spent summers learning to fish and hunt in those woods. But something about that night, about the way the trees seemed to close in on me, set my nerves on edge. Maybe it was the weather, or maybe it was the idea of searching for a couple who might already be dead. The wind picked up as I drove, sending leaves skittering across the road. The radio crackled with static, and I reached over to adjust it, but the sound persisted. It wasn't just static, it was almost rhythmic, like breathing. I switched it off, preferring the silence to whatever that was. The trees grew denser as I approached the cabin area, their branches scraping against the sides of my cruiser. I'd driven this road hundreds of times, but tonight it seemed narrower, as if the forest was slowly reclaiming it inch by inch. My headlights caught a glimpse of something darting across the road, too fast to make out properly. I slammed on the brakes, the cruiser skidding slightly on the loose gravel. Nothing there, just shadows playing tricks. "Get it together, Terry," I muttered to myself, knuckles white against the steering wheel. The road forked ahead. Left led deeper into the woods, where the newer cabins were built. Right led to the older properties, the ones that had been there since the 60s. According to Madeline, our missing couple, Ben and Catherine Russell, had rented one of the older cabins, a place called Pine Ridge. I turned right, the cruiser bouncing over exposed roots and rocks. The headlights swept across the trees, creating monstrous shadows that seemed to move independently of their sources. That feeling of being watched intensified, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I rubbed my eyes, trying to focus. It had been a long day, and exhaustion was making me jumpy. There were no monsters in these woods. At least, that's what I told myself. The cabin appeared ahead, a dark silhouette against the even darker forest. No lights, no movement. Just an unnatural stillness that made my stomach knot. I pulled up slowly, killing the engine but leaving the headlights on. They illuminated the front porch, casting long shadows across weathered wood. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out, the night air hitting me like a cold slap. Fall in North Dakota wasn't kind, especially after sundown. I pulled my jacket tighter and approached the cabin. The steps creaked under my weight, each one a warning I chose to ignore. The front window was dark, but I could see inside slightly. Furniture, shadows, nothing moving. I knocked on the door, 3 sharp raps that echoed through the trees. "Mr. and Mrs. Russell, Wainwright Police. Anyone home?" Silence answered back. I knocked again, harder this time. "Hello? Anyone in there?" The wind picked up, whistling through the trees, carrying with it a sickly sweet smell that reminded me of roadkill left too long in the summer sun. I covered my nose, trying not to gag. Something wasn't right. Something was very wrong. I tried the door, unlocked. It swung open with a low groan, as if the cabin itself was in pain. The smell intensified, and I had to step back, taking a deep breath of fresh air before continuing. "Police? Anyone here?" I called out, my voice sounding smaller than I intended. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating a scene that made my stomach turn. The furniture was upended, chairs broken, table splintered. The walls were marked with long, deep gouges, as if something with massive claws had torn through them in a frenzy. But it was the floor that made me freeze. Dark stains spread across the wooden planks, leading toward the back door. Blood, a lot of it. I radioed Madeline. "I'm at the Russell cabin. Signs of violence, blood on the floor. I'm going to check the perimeter, see if I can find them. Want me to send backup?" Her voice crackled through the static. I hesitated. Protocol said yes, but backup meant Sheriff Cole, and he was probably 3 beers deep at the Rusty Nail by now. Besides, this was my first real case since coming back on duty. I wanted to handle it myself. "Negative. I'll check it out first, let you know what I find." "Be careful, Terry," she said, concern evident even through the poor connection. "Something about this doesn't feel right." "When does it ever?" I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. I ended the call and moved toward the back door, following the trail of blood. It led outside, into the woods. The night seemed to press in around me, a living, breathing thing, watching my every move. I stepped outside, my flashlight beam catching something reflective near the tree line. Glass. I moved closer and realized it was a camera, broken and covered in blood. Next to it lay a man's shoe, torn and dirty. The trail of blood continued into the woods. I knew I should wait for backup, knew this was beyond what a small-town cop should handle alone. But I also knew that if the Russells were out there, injured and alone, every minute counted. I took a deep breath and stepped into the tree line, leaving the relative safety of the cabin behind. The forest swallowed me whole, darkness closing in from all sides. The only sound was my own breathing and the occasional snap of twigs beneath my feet. The blood trail was getting fresher. Whatever had happened to the Russells, it had happened recently, very recently. Ahead, the trees thinned slightly, opening into a small clearing. My flashlight beam swept across it, and what I saw made me stop dead in my tracks. This wasn't just a case of missing tourists anymore. This was something else entirely, something that would haunt me for years to come. When I pulled up to the cabin, the place was dark. No lights, no movement. The air was unnaturally still, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. I parked the cruiser and stepped out, the gravel crunching beneath my boots. I was unarmed. Town budget cuts meant no standard-issue firearms for us, and I'd always figured there wasn't much use for one anyway. Hell, the worst we dealt with was a rabid coyote or a drunk with a bad attitude. The cabin door was ajar, which immediately set off alarms in my head. People don't just leave their doors open out here, it's asking for trouble. Animals, thieves, you name it. I pulled my flashlight from my belt and stepped inside. The cabin smelled like damp wood and mildew, the kind of scent that sticks to your clothes. There was no sign of a struggle, but something was off. The furniture was in place. Dishes were on the table, but it felt abandoned, like they'd just gotten up and left without a second thought. Their luggage was still in the corner, untouched. I did a quick sweep of the place, no blood, no broken windows, no signs of foul play. But the longer I stayed inside, the heavier the air seemed to get, like the cabin itself was pushing me out. I shook it off and headed back outside to check the surrounding area. That's when I saw it. Deep, irregular scratches in the dirt leading from the side of the cabin to the woods. They weren't the kind of marks an animal makes. No, these were deliberate. I followed the trail cautiously, my flashlight cutting through the thickening trees. The further I went, the more uneasy I became. My mind raced with explanations, but none of them made sense. The scratches continued deeper into the woods, disappearing into the brush. About 20 minutes in, I found what I was looking for, or rather, what I wasn't looking for. The couple, or at least what was left of them. Their bodies were mauled, limbs twisted at unnatural angles, blood soaked into the earth, pooling in dark, sticky patches. The worst part wasn't the sight, though. It was the realization that whatever had done this wasn't finished. The bodies weren't scattered like a wild animal would leave them. No, it was as if something had been interrupted in the middle of its work. There were more of those same scratches near the bodies, dragging toward the nearby stream. I knelt down, examining the ground around them. Whoever or whatever had done this wasn't just killing, it was collecting. I ran my hand through my hair, trying to think, to make sense of the mess in front of me. I didn't have long to ponder. Behind me there was a sound. A low, heavy rustling in the trees. I turned, my flashlight darting between the trunks. The air had changed, thicker, with a stench that hit my nose like a punch. Decay, sweat, something old and rotting, and then I saw it. The thing moved through the trees with an unnatural speed, like it was dragging itself on all fours but still managing to keep pace with me. It was hard to see clearly, but from what I caught in the light, it wasn't anything I'd ever seen in these parts. It was massive, bigger than any animal I knew of, and its body seemed twisted, wrong, like someone had taken the anatomy of a bear and a human and mashed them together in the worst possible way. But it wasn't a bear. It couldn't be. I could feel its eyes on me. I didn't need to see them. You know that gut feeling when you're being watched? Multiply that by 100, and it still wouldn't come close to what I felt. I ran. I'm not ashamed to say it. Whatever that thing was, I knew I didn't stand a chance. I could hear it behind me. The snapping of branches, the thudding of its weight on the forest floor, the sound of its breath, heavy, labored, grew closer with every step. I wasn't going to make it to the cruiser, not at this rate. My foot caught a root, and I went down hard, face first, into the dirt. Pain shot through my ankle as I scrambled to get up, but it was too late. It was on me. I felt the pressure first, a heavy weight that pinned me to the ground. My flashlight rolled away, the beam flickering against the trees. I braced for the worst, then it stopped. The pressure lifted, and the sound of rustling faded. I lay there, breathing hard, trying to process what had just happened. Slowly I pushed myself up, wincing at the pain in my leg. My flashlight was still flickering in the distance, casting weak light on the ground. I crawled over, grabbing it and spinning around to see if the thing was still there. It wasn't, but something else was. At first I thought it was another body, but as I got closer, I realized it was something else entirely. Something human, but not. It was hunched over, pale skin stretched tight across bones. Long matted hair hung in front of its face, but the thing wasn't moving. I edged closer, my heart pounding. It looked like a person, but it was all wrong. Too thin, too long-limbed, and it reeked of death. I backed away, shaking, trying to figure out what to do next when I heard another sound. This time, it was a voice, a raspy, choking laugh. The thing in front of me wasn't dead. Not yet. I watched in horror as it started to rise, its joints cracking like old wood. That's when I realized, the scratches, the bodies, they weren't just the work of some animal. This thing, it had been hunting, and I'd just interrupted its meal. I don't remember running back to the cruiser. I don't remember driving back to town. All I know is I made it. Barely. The next morning when I reported what happened, no one questioned me. They didn't ask for details, didn't send anyone up to the cabin. It was like they already knew, like they'd been waiting for this to happen. And as I sat in the station trying to piece it all together, I realized something. Whatever that thing was, whatever I'd seen, it wasn't going to stop. They didn't disappear though, the bodies. They were real, just like that thing, whatever it was. As I sat at my desk, hands still shaking, I tried to write up my report. How do you describe something you can barely comprehend? How do you put into words a horror that defies explanation? The station was quiet that morning. Most of the staff hadn't arrived yet, and I was grateful for the solitude. I needed time to process, to convince myself I wasn't losing my mind. I jumped at the sound of the door opening. Sheriff Emmett Reed walked in, his face grim. "Morning, Terry," he said, hanging up his hat. "Heard you had quite a night." I nodded, not trusting my voice just yet. "Madeline filled me in," he continued, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "Said you found those missing tourists, or what was left of them." "Yes, sir." I managed, clearing my throat. I've never seen anything like it." Reed sat down across from me, his weathered face unreadable. "Tell me exactly what you saw out there." I recounted the events as best I could, trying to stick to the facts. The open cabin door, the scratches, the bodies, the creature. With each word I expected him to interrupt, to call me crazy or drunk, but he just listened, nodding occasionally, his expression growing darker. When I finished, he sat back, running a hand through his thinning gray hair. "You're not the first, you know, sir, to see it, whatever it is." He lowered his voice, though we were alone. "This town's got history, Terry. Old history. Things no one talks about." A chill ran through me. "What kind of things?" Reed stood up, moving to the window. Outside, Wainwright was waking up. People going about their day, oblivious to the horror lurking in the woods. Stories. Legends. People going missing over the years. Bodies found, not whole. He turned back to me. "Most folks dismiss it as animal attacks. Bears, wolves. But those of us who've been here long enough, We know better. Why hasn't anyone done something? I asked, anger rising in my chest. If people are dying because we can't prove it, Reed cut me off. Because every time someone tries to hunt it down, they either come back empty-handed or they don't come back at all. So we just let it keep killing? We do what we can, Terry. We warn people to stay out of those woods. We patrol the areas we know are safe. But that thing, it's been here longer than any of us, and it's not going anywhere. I couldn't accept that. I wouldn't. We need to go back out there, get those bodies, get evidence. Reed's expression hardened. No one's going back out there. Not today, not until we figure out a plan. But that's an order, Deputy. His tone left no room for argument. I'm not losing any more people to that thing. I sat there fuming as Reed walked away. How many people had died because of this town's secrets? How many more would die if we did nothing? The day dragged on, each minute feeling like an hour. I couldn't focus on paperwork, couldn't eat the sandwich Madeline brought me. All I could think about was what I'd seen in those woods, and what might still be out there. As evening approached, Reed called me into his office. He looked tired, older than his 60 years. I've been thinking about what you said, he began, gesturing for me to sit. About going back out there. I nodded, hope rising. I'm putting together a team, small, quiet. No one outside the department needs to know. He fixed me with a stern look. But we do this my way, understand? No heroes, no lone wolves. We go in prepared, or we don't go in at all. Yes, sir, I agreed, relieved. When? Tomorrow. Dawn. We'll meet here, gear up, and head out. He pushed a file across the desk. In the meantime, I want you to look through this. I opened the file to find old reports, some yellowed with age. Missing persons. Animal attacks. Strange sightings dating back decades. Do your homework, Terry, Reed said quietly. Know what we're up against. I spent the night at the station, poring over the files. The pattern was clear. Every few years, disappearances spiked. Always in the same area. Always explained away as accidents or animal attacks. Some reports included witness statements, describing a creature much like what I'd seen. Large, malformed, moving with unnatural speed. The descriptions varied in detail, but the terror in the words was consistent. One report from 1976 caught my attention. A hunter named Joseph Blackstone had encountered the creature and managed to wound it before escaping. His description was more detailed than most. A bipedal figure, over 7 feet tall, with elongated limbs and a face that was almost human but twisted by something inhuman. Blackstone had led a group of men back to hunt the creature, but they found nothing. 2 weeks later, Blackstone was found dead in his home, his body mutilated in the same manner as the victims in the woods. The message was clear. This thing could follow you home. I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, Reed was shaking me awake. Dawn light filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows across the room. Time to go, he said simply. Outside, 3 other officers waited by a pair of cruisers. Ricky Walsh, a young deputy who'd only been with us a year, Hank Peterson, an old-timer who'd been Reed's partner back in the day, and Lucy Keller, our firearms specialist. We geared up in silence, checking weapons and radios. Reed had brought shotguns, rifles, even an old military-issue flare gun. This wasn't a search party, it was a hunting party. We stay together, Reed instructed as we loaded into the vehicles. No one wanders off, no matter what. If you see something, you call it out. If I say run, you run. No questions, no hesitation. Clear? We all nodded. The gravity of the situation settling over us like a shroud. The drive to the logging road was tense, no one speaking. I directed them to the cabin, my stomach nodding as we approached. In the daylight, the place looked almost ordinary, just another neglected vacation rental, but the scratches were still there, leading into the woods. That's our trail, I said, pointing. Reed nodded, his face grim. Let's go get those bodies then. Proof that something's out there. We moved into the forest in formation, Reed and Peterson leading, Lucy and Ricky on the flanks, me in the center. The woods felt different in the daylight, less oppressive but no less dangerous. I led them to where I'd found the bodies, but when we reached the spot there was nothing there. No corpses, no blood, not even disturbed earth. It was as if the scene I'd witnessed had been wiped clean. I don't understand, I said, looking around frantically. They were right here, I swear it. Reed knelt, examining the ground. I believe you, Terry. Look, he pointed to faint drag marks leading deeper into the woods, away from the stream. It moved them, Peterson said quietly. Hid its kills. A chill ran through the group. This wasn't a mindless animal. This was something that understood the concept of evidence. We follow the trail, Reed decided after a moment's consideration. Carefully, we tracked the drag marks further into the forest where the trees grew so dense that the sunlight barely penetrated. The air grew colder, damper, filled with the smell of rot, and then we found them. Not just the couple I'd seen, but others, many others. A grotesque collection of bodies in various states of decay, piled in a ravine like discarded trash. Some were fresh, some were little more than bones. Ricky turned away, retching. Lucy crossed herself, muttering a prayer. Peterson just stared, his face ashen. Jesus, Reed breathed. How long has this been going on? A rustling sound came from above us, branches creaking under weight. We all looked up, weapons raised, and there it was, perched on a thick branch, watching us. In the daylight, I could see it clearly now. Its skin was a mottled gray, stretched over a frame too large for it. Its face was the worst part, features almost human but distorted, like a reflection in troubled water. Its eyes were intelligent, aware. And they were fixed on me. For a moment, no one moved. Then, without warning, it leaped down, landing with inhuman grace despite its bulk. Reed fired first, the shotgun blast echoing through the trees. The creature staggered but didn't fall. "Run!" Reed shouted, firing again. But it was too late. The thing moved with terrifying speed, knocking Peterson aside like he was nothing. Lucy got off 2 shots before it reached her, its clawed hand tearing across her chest. She fell, screaming. Ricky and I pulled her back, firing as we retreated. The creature advanced, seemingly unfazed by the bullets. Reed stood his ground, emptying his shotgun into the beast. It paused, looking down at the wounds in its chest. Then it looked up at Reed, and I swear it smiled. What happened next will stay with me forever. The creature lunged and Reed was gone, dragged into the trees with a speed that defied belief. His scream cut off abruptly, replaced by a wet, tearing sound that made my stomach turn. "Go! Go!" I shouted, helping Ricky drag Lucy back toward the cabin. Peterson was right behind us, firing blindly into the trees. We didn't make it far before it came for us again. A blur of movement, and Peterson was down, clutching at his throat, blood spurting between his fingers. Ricky and I managed to get Lucy to the cruisers, but when I turned back to help Peterson, he was gone. Just a trail of blood leading into the darkness. We sped back to town, Lucy bleeding out in the back seat, Ricky white-knuckled at the wheel. I radioed ahead, telling them to prepare for casualties, to call in help from the neighboring counties, but I knew even then that it wouldn't be enough. We'd poked the beast, and now it was coming for us. All of us. I spent the next few days on edge, pacing the station, the events replaying in my mind like a broken record. The town was quiet. The usual chatter among the locals stifled, as if everyone sensed the unease hanging in the air. I tried to focus on routine tasks, filing reports, answering phone calls, but my thoughts kept drifting back to the cabin and the thing lurking in the woods. The official story was that Sheriff Reed and Deputy Peterson had been killed in an animal attack while investigating a missing persons case. Lucy was in the hospital 2 towns over, fighting for her life. The wounds she'd sustained were unlike anything the doctors had seen before. Not quite bear, not quite wolf, something else. Ricky had quit the force the day after, packed up his truck and left town without saying goodbye. I couldn't blame him. If I had anywhere else to go, I might have done the same. With Reed gone, I was acting sheriff now, at least until the county could send someone to replace him. The responsibility weighed on me like a physical thing, pressing down on my shoulders, making it hard to breathe. One night, while poring over the few leads we had on the missing couple, Madeline called me into the break room. Her expression was grave. "Terry, you need to see this." She handed me a newspaper, the headline bold and jarring. "Mysterious disappearances in North Dakota. Locals fear the worst." As I read through the article, my heart sank. It detailed reports of hikers gone missing, strange noises in the woods, and sightings of an unidentifiable creature. A sense of dread settled over me. This was bigger than I thought. The thing wasn't just a local legend. It was real, and it was actively hunting. "Are we going to do something about this?" I asked, my voice low. Madeline shrugged, glancing at the floor. "The county says there's nothing to worry about, just local lore. You know how people get." "But we know what we saw," I insisted. "People are disappearing, and we're sitting on our hands," she sighed. "What do you want me to do? It's just us out here. If we start a panic, who knows what'll happen." I left the break room feeling frustrated. I needed to do something. But what? I couldn't exactly go out there alone, not after what happened last time. The weight of responsibility pressed down on me. That evening, unable to sleep, I drove back to the logging road, the headlights cutting through the darkness like a knife. This time I brought a flashlight and a shovel. If I was going to prove to myself and to anyone else that something was out there, I needed more than just my word. As I parked the cruiser and walked toward the cabin, the familiar chill returned, a mix of anticipation and dread gnawing at my stomach. I approached cautiously, flashlight sweeping over the ground. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the soft rustle of leaves and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. I reached the cabin and sure enough, the scratches were still there. They led me further into the woods, deeper than I had ventured before. Each step felt like a countdown, a silent agreement with fate. I followed the trail, my heart racing. The trees closed in around me, and I felt that sense of being watched again. I stopped and listened, the silence deafening. Just as I was about to turn back, I heard it. A faint wheezing breath, closer than before. I quickly ducked behind a tree, pressing myself against the rough bark. My mind raced, desperate for a plan. Suddenly the breathing stopped. I waited, tension coiling in my muscles. After a few moments, I stepped out cautiously and continued following the trail. It led me to a clearing, and what I found made my stomach drop. There, amidst the underbrush, were more bodies. Not just the couple. There were hikers, locals, people I recognized from town. Their faces were twisted in fear, and it was clear they hadn't died peacefully. It was a graveyard of lost souls, a collection of horrors that screamed for justice. I took a step back, but the crunch of leaves beneath my boot gave me away. The creature emerged from the shadows, its massive frame stepping into the moonlight. This time I could see it clearly. The beast stood on two legs, but its body was still hunched over, its limbs too long, fingers ending in claws that glistened with dark, congealed blood. It locked onto me and I felt that gut-wrenching fear shoot through me. This was it. No turning back. With every ounce of adrenaline I had left, I ran. I darted through the trees, zigzagging as I went, praying I could lose it. Behind me, I could hear it crashing through the underbrush, its heavy footsteps thudding against the ground like a war drum. I burst through the clearing, spotting my cruiser in the distance. I could make it. I could. A sudden pain shot through my ankle as I tripped over a root. I tumbled to the ground, gasping. The creature was almost upon me. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline surging as I threw myself into the car, fumbling with the keys. My hands shook violently, but I managed to get the engine roaring to life just as it reached me. I slammed the gas pedal, the tires screeching as I tore down the dirt road, glancing in the rearview mirror. The creature stood at the edge of the clearing, but it didn't chase after me. It just watched, its massive form silhouetted against the moonlight, waiting for me to come back. The rest of that night was a blur. I called in the county sheriff, but he dismissed my claims, chalking it up to a wild imagination. No one believed me, not even Madeline. I spent hours trying to convince them, to show them the evidence, but they brushed me off. Days turned into weeks. I felt the grip of paranoia tightening around me. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I began to hear whispers among the townsfolk about the disappearances, the legends growing like weeds. They were convinced it was just an animal, just a story, but I knew better. I'd seen it with my own eyes, felt its breath on my skin, heard the wet sound of it tearing through flesh. At night, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if it knew where I lived, if it was watching my house, waiting for the right moment to strike. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of branches outside my window sent my heart racing. I tried to find solace in work, but even that was tainted now. Every missing person report, every strange noise complaint, reminded me of what lurked in the woods. The county sent a new sheriff, a man named Jack Rivera, who looked at me with a mixture of pity and suspicion. He'd heard the stories, of course. Everyone had. But he didn't believe them, didn't want to believe them. "Look, Dylan," he said during our first meeting. "I get it. You've been through a trauma. Losing Reed and Peterson like that. It's enough to mess with anyone's head." "I know what I saw," I insisted, trying to keep my voice steady. Rivera sighed, leaning back in Reed's old chair. "It would always be Reed's chair to me. What you think you saw. The mind plays tricks, especially under stress. You think I imagined it? That I imagined all those bodies? I think you saw a bear attack, and your brain filled in the gaps. It happens." I wanted to argue, to make him understand, but I could see it was pointless. He'd made up his mind before he even arrived in Wainwright. So I retreated, did my job, kept my head down. But I didn't stop watching, waiting. I knew it would happen again. It was just a matter of time. And sure enough, 3 weeks after Rivera took over, the calls started coming in again. hikers seeing something strange in the woods, campers hearing noises at night, a family reporting claw marks on the side of their car after parking near the logging road. Rivera dismissed them all, attributing them to bears, teenagers playing pranks, or people getting caught up in local superstitions. But I kept a record, marking each incident on a map in my apartment. A pattern was forming, a circle closing in on the town itself. One morning, I received a call from Madeline, her voice tight with worry. "Terry, we've got another missing person. Brianna Carson, 17. Didn't come home from school yesterday." My heart sank. I knew Brianna. She was a quiet kid, smart, kept to herself. Not the type to run away. Where was she last seen? Walking home, along the edge of town, where the woods start. I felt a chill run through me. "I'll take it. Rivera says to wait." "I don't care what Rivera says. This is my case." I hung up before she could argue, grabbing my jacket and keys. Outside, the sky was overcast, threatening rain. Perfect hunting weather. I drove to the Carson house first, talked to Brianna's parents. They were frantic, eyes red from crying, clutching her photo like a lifeline. I promised to find her, though I knew in my gut it might already be too late. Her usual route home took her past the eastern edge of town, where the forest crept close to the backyards of the outermost houses. I walked the path slowly, scanning the ground for any sign of disturbance. At the point where the sidewalk ended, and a dirt path continued into the trees, I found it. A single shoe, small, clearly belonging to a teenage girl. And beside it, those now familiar scratches in the earth. My radio crackled. "Dylan, where are you?" Rivera's voice irritated. "I'm following a lead on the Carson girl," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "I told Madeline to have you wait for me. Didn't have time. I think I've found something." I described the shoe, but deliberately left out the scratches. He wouldn't understand, wouldn't believe me. "Stay put. I'm sending Gomez to back you up." "Can't wait. The trail's fresh, and it's going to rain soon." I switched off the radio before he could respond. I knew I was probably ending my career, but at that moment I didn't care. Finding Brianna was all that mattered. I followed the trail into the woods, moving as quietly as I could. This time, I was armed, my personal sidearm tucked into my belt. If I encountered the creature again, I wouldn't be defenseless. The path led deeper into the forest, away from town, toward a part of the woods I wasn't familiar with. The trees grew denser, older, their twisted branches blocking out what little daylight filtered through the clouds. After about 20 minutes of tracking, I heard something. A soft whimpering, barely audible over the rustle of leaves. I froze, listening intently. There it was again, the sound of someone in pain, trying not to make noise. I moved toward the sound, stepping carefully to avoid alerting whatever might be nearby. In a small depression between two large boulders, I found her. Brianna was curled up, shivering, her clothes torn and dirty. Her leg was bent at an unnatural angle, clearly broken. When she saw me, her eyes widened in terror. "It's okay," I whispered, kneeling beside her. "I'm here to help. Deputy Dillon, remember? We met at the school career day." Recognition flickered in her eyes, followed by relief. "It's out there," she breathed, her voice barely audible. "I saw it. It chased me. I fell. My leg." "I know," I said, glancing around nervously. "We need to get you out of here. Can you move at all?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "It comes back. Every few hours, watches me, like it's waiting for something." My blood ran cold. I'd been lucky before, but carrying an injured girl through the woods would slow me down considerably. We'd be easy prey. "I'm going to call for help," I told her, pulling out my radio. "We'll get you home." But the radio was dead. Just static. We were too deep in the woods, or something was interfering with the signal. "Okay, new plan," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "I'm going to carry you. It'll hurt, and I need you to be as quiet as possible. Can you do that?" Brianna nodded, her face pale but determined. I scooped her up as gently as I could, but she still gasped in pain as her broken leg shifted. She bit down on her lip, drawing blood, but didn't scream. "Brave girl," I murmured, starting back the way I'd come. "Just a little longer, and you'll be safe." We made slow progress, each step careful, measured. I kept my ears strained for any sound that might indicate we weren't alone, but the forest was eerily quiet. No birds, no insects, just the sound of our breathing and the occasional whimper from Brianna when I jostled her too much. The light was fading fast, the approaching storm making dusk come early. I picked up the pace, knowing we needed to reach open ground before darkness fell completely. We were maybe halfway back to town when I heard it. A low, rumbling growl, somewhere to our left. Brianna tensed in my arms, her eyes wide with terror. "Don't move," I whispered, setting her down behind a fallen tree. "Stay here, don't make a sound." I drew my gun, moving away from her hiding spot, trying to draw attention to myself. If the creature was hunting, I wanted it to follow me, not the injured girl. The growl came again, closer this time. I turned slowly, scanning the trees, and froze. It stood about 20 yards away, partially hidden by the undergrowth. In the dimming light, it looked even more monstrous, a hulking silhouette with too many angles, its head cocked to one side as it watched me. I raised my gun but hesitated. The previous encounters had shown that bullets might not be effective, and if I fired and missed, or merely wounded it, I might bring its full fury down on us. For a long moment we stared at each other, hunter and prey, though I wasn't sure which was which anymore. Then, slowly, deliberately, it began to move toward me. Each step measured, predatory. I backed away, keeping the gun trained on it, trying to lead it further from Brianna. It followed, matching my pace, never taking its eyes off me. The standoff couldn't last. Eventually, I'd trip. Or it would lunge, or night would fall completely. I needed to end this, one way or another. I fired. The shot echoed through the trees, startling a flock of crows into flight. The creature staggered, a dark stain spreading across its chest, but it didn't fall. Instead, it let out a roar that seemed to shake the very air, a sound of rage and hunger and something else, something almost human. It charged. I emptied the gun, each shot finding its mark, but still it came, moving with that unnatural speed. I turned to run, but it was too late. It was on me, its weight driving me to the ground, crushing the breath from my lungs. I felt its hot breath on my neck, smelled the rot and decay that clung to it. This was it. This was how I died, torn apart in the woods like so many others. But the killing blow never came. Instead, the creature's head snapped up, its attention drawn to something else. A new sound. Voices, shouting, the beam of flashlights cutting through the trees. The search party. Rivera must have followed me despite my radio silence. The creature hesitated, torn between finishing me and fleeing from the approaching humans. For a moment its face was inches from mine, and I saw something in its eyes that chilled me more than its appearance ever could. Recognition, calculation, intelligence. Then it was gone, melting into the shadows with a speed that belied its size, leaving me gasping on the forest floor. Minutes later, Rivera and 2 deputies burst into the clearing, guns drawn, flashlights sweeping wildly. "Dylan, what the hell happened?" "We heard shots." I sat up slowly, wincing at the pain in my ribs. "The girl," I managed. "Brianna, she's behind that fallen tree, broken leg, get her first." As they rushed to help Brianna, I stared into the darkness where the creature had vanished. It could have killed me, should have killed me, but it hadn't. Why? The question haunted me as we made our way back to town. Brianna safely strapped to a stretcher, me limping alongside. She wouldn't talk about what had happened, wouldn't describe what had chased her, but her eyes said it all, the same haunted look I saw in the mirror every morning. Rivera cornered me at the hospital while the doctors were setting Brianna's leg. "You disobeyed a direct order," he began, his face tight with anger. "Went off alone, nearly got yourself killed." "I found her, didn't I?" I cut in. "She's alive because I didn't wait." "You're lucky you're both alive. What were you thinking, going into those woods without backup?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and decided to take a chance. I was thinking that there's something in those woods that's been killing people for decades, and no one wants to admit it. Rivera's expression shifted, the anger fading to something more complex. "The bear, it's not a bear," I said firmly. "You know it, I know it, everyone in this town knows it. They're just too scared to say it out loud." He was silent for a long moment, then sighed, rubbing his face. "What do you want me to do, Dylan? Put out an APB on a monster? Tell people to lock their doors because some creature from a horror movie is coming for them? I want you to protect this town. That's our job." "And how do we do that? Against something like whatever you think is out there?" I didn't have an answer for him. Not yet. But as I walked home that night, the questions kept circling in my mind. What was it? Why had it spared me? How many more would die before someone took action? I looked up at the stars, barely visible through the gathering clouds, and made a promise to myself. I would find answers. I would find a way to stop it, even if it cost me everything. That evening, unable to sleep, I drove back to the logging road, the headlights cutting through the darkness like a knife. This time I brought a flashlight and a shovel. If I was going to prove to myself and to anyone else that something was out there, I needed more than just my word. As I parked the cruiser and walked toward the cabin, the familiar chill returned, a mix of anticipation and dread gnawing at my stomach. I approached cautiously, flashlight sweeping over the ground. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the soft rustle of leaves and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. I reached the cabin and sure enough, the scratches were still there. They led me further into the woods, deeper than I had ventured before. Each step felt like a countdown, a silent agreement with fate. I followed the trail, my heart racing. The trees closed in around me, and I felt that sense of being watched again. I stopped and listened, the silence deafening. Just as I was about to turn back, I heard it, a faint wheezing breath, closer than before. I quickly ducked behind a tree, pressing myself against the rough bark. My mind raced, desperate for a plan. Suddenly the breathing stopped. I waited, tension coiling in my muscles. After a few moments, I stepped out cautiously and continued following the trail. It led me to a clearing, and what I found made my stomach drop. There, amidst the underbrush, were more bodies. Not just the couple, there were hikers, locals, people I recognized from town. Their faces were twisted in fear, and it was clear they hadn't died peacefully. It was a graveyard of lost souls, a collection of horrors that screamed for justice. I took a step back, but the crunch of leaves beneath my boot gave me away. The creature emerged from the shadows, its massive frame stepping into the moonlight. This time I could see it clearly. The beast stood on two legs, but its body was still hunched over, its limbs too long, fingers ending in claws that glistened with dark, congealed blood. It locked onto me, and I felt that gut-wrenching fear shoot through me. This was it. No turning back. With every ounce of adrenaline I had left, I ran. I darted through the trees, zigzagging as I went, praying I could lose it. Behind me, I could hear it crashing through the underbrush, its heavy footsteps thudding against the ground like a war drum. I burst through the clearing, spotting my cruiser in the distance. I could make it. A sudden pain shot through my ankle as I tripped over a root. I tumbled to the ground, gasping. The creature was almost upon me. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline surging as I threw myself into the car, fumbling with the keys. My hands shook violently, but I managed to get the engine roaring to life just as it reached me. I slammed the gas pedal, the tires screeching as I tore down the dirt road, glancing in the rearview mirror. The creature stood at the edge of the clearing, but it didn't chase after me. It just watched, its massive form silhouetted against the moonlight, waiting for me to come back. The rest of that night was a blur. I called in the sheriff, but he dismissed my claims, chalking it up to a wild imagination. No one believed me, not even Madeline. I spent hours trying to convince them, to show them the evidence, but they brushed me off. Days turned into weeks. I felt the grip of paranoia tightening around me. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I began to hear whispers among the townsfolk about the disappearances, the legends growing like weeds. They were convinced it was just an animal, just a story. Then one night I caught a break. Madeline got a call about another missing person, a local teen who'd been hiking alone. I bolted into action, determined to find her before it was too late. The sheriff finally relented, sending a small team with me to the last known location. As we hiked into the woods, I led the way, heart pounding with each step. But this time the air felt different, thick with tension, pregnant with dread. When we reached the clearing, I froze. The bodies were gone. All that remained were faint stains on the ground, evidence of what had happened. We searched for hours, calling out the teen's name, but there was no response, just the quiet rustling of the forest. As we prepared to turn back, I caught sight of something. A flash of white through the trees. "Over there!" I yelled, rushing toward it. The others followed, hearts pounding with hope. We stumbled into another clearing, and there she was, huddled against a tree, shaking and wide-eyed. I rushed over, kneeling beside her. "It's okay, you're safe now," I assured her, even though I wasn't so sure. But before I could get her out, the air shifted again. That same suffocating feeling returned, and we were surrounded. The creature emerged from the trees, dragging something behind it, a body. A primal scream tore through the night. It lunged at us, and I could feel the world closing in. I had to protect the girl. The sheriff shouted orders, but they were lost in the chaos as we scrambled for cover. The creature was faster, stronger, and it caught one of my colleagues before we could even react. The screams echoed through the trees, drowning out everything else. In that moment of pure adrenaline, I remembered the shovel I'd brought from the cruiser. I grabbed it from the ground where I'd dropped it earlier and raced toward the thing, my heart pounding in my ears. With every ounce of strength, I swung the shovel, catching the creature across its side. It let out a horrible screech, the sound reverberating in my bones. But it wasn't enough. It turned. swiping at me with a claw that felt like a freight train. I ducked just in time, feeling the wind from its swipe as it roared in fury. I realized then that this was my chance. I couldn't let fear stop me. I lunged again, the shovel connecting with its neck. The creature staggered, but I pressed on, adrenaline pushing me beyond my limits. With a final desperate swing, I struck its head. It fell to the ground, motionless, the body crumpling in on itself. I stood there panting, the girl staring at me wide-eyed. Then came the quiet. We'd done it. I looked around, catching the terrified expressions of my colleagues as they realized what had just happened. The proof of what had haunted our town lay before us. The aftermath was swift. The sheriff ordered a full investigation, though we knew there would be whispers about what we found. There would always be skeptics, always be those who doubted. But I didn't care. I had seen it with my own eyes, and the evidence was there for anyone willing to look. We retrieved the bodies of the victims, laying them to rest while the town struggled to come to terms with the horror lurking in the woods. Months passed, and as the seasons changed, so did the stories. New legends sprung up, but the truth remained hidden beneath the surface, a shadow just out of reach. After the encounter, I found myself drawn to the town library, spending hours in the local history section. If this thing had been hunting in our woods for decades, there had to be records, stories, something that could help me understand what we were dealing with. The librarian, an elderly woman named Ruth, watched me with curious eyes as I piled books on North Dakota folklore and local history on the table. "Looking for something specific, Deputy?" she asked, her voice soft but knowing. I hesitated, then decided to take a chance. Information about incidents in the woods, disappearances, strange sightings. Ruth's expression shifted, a shadow passing over her face. "You've seen it, haven't you?" My heart skipped a beat. "Seen what?" She glanced around, making sure we were alone, then leaned closer. "The Watcher, that's what my grandmother called it. Been here since before the town was founded." "What do you know about it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Not much, just stories. Old tales passed down." She straightened up, adjusting her glasses. "Wait here." She disappeared into the back room, returning a few minutes later with a worn leather journal. This belonged to James Wainwright, the town's founder. Most folks think he just kept records of land purchases and such, but there's more. Things the Historical Society doesn't include in their displays. I took the journal carefully, feeling the weight of history in my hands. "Thank you." "Be careful, Deputy," Ruth warned, her eyes serious. "Some truths are best left buried." Back at my apartment, I pored over the journal, deciphering Wainwright's cramped handwriting by lamplight. Most of it was indeed mundane. Crop yields, weather patterns, births and deaths, but scattered throughout were entries that made my blood run cold. April 15, 1872, 3 men missing after hunting expedition. Edwards claims to have seen something in the trees. Not bear, not wolf, something else. The men still not found. June 3, 1872, another disappearance. Young woman from the Miller homestead, found her clothes by the creek, torn to shreds. No body. Edwards swears it's the same creature. July 29, 1872, Edwards dead. Found him in his cabin, torn apart, door locked from inside. Whatever did this isn't natural. The entries continued, spanning decades. Wainwright documented each incident meticulously, though his tone grew increasingly desperate as the years passed. In one of the final entries, dated just before his death, he wrote, "December 12, 1901, I have failed this town. I brought them here, knowing what lurked in these woods. I thought we could contain it, drive it away. I was wrong. It has only grown stronger, feeding on our fear as much as our flesh. May God forgive me for what I've done." What had Wainwright done? What did he know about the creature that he took to his grave? The next day I sought out the oldest resident of Wainwright, a man named Gerald Holbrook. At 95, he'd seen more of the town's history than anyone alive. I found him on his porch, smoking a pipe, his rheumy eyes fixed on the distant tree line. "Mr. Holbrook," I greeted him. "Mind if I ask you a few questions?" He gestured to the empty chair beside him. "About the thing in the woods, I reckon." I sat down, surprised. "How did you?" "News travels fast in a small town. Heard you've been asking around, digging up old stories." He tapped his pipe against the porch railing. "Saw it myself, once. Back in '43, before I shipped out for the war. Didn't know what it was then, still don't." "But you believe it's real?" Gerald laughed, a dry sound like leaves rustling. "Real as you and me, been taking folks from these parts for generations. Comes and goes in cycles. Few years of peace, then it gets hungry again. Has anyone ever tried to stop it? To hunt it down? His expression darkened. Many have tried. Few have lived to tell about it. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. There was a group, back in the 50s. Local men, veterans mostly, called themselves the Watchers. They knew about it, tracked it, tried to keep people safe. What happened to them? One by one they disappeared. Last one was my friend Earl Simmons. Found him in the woods, or what was left of him. After that, no one wanted to talk about it anymore. Easier to blame bears, or wolves, or drifters passing through. I digested this information, the pieces starting to come together. Do you think it can be killed? Gerald studied me for a long moment. Maybe, but ask yourself this, deputy. What happens if you wound it but don't kill it? What happens if you make it angry? The question haunted me as I continued my research. I delved into other towns' records, looking for similar patterns of disappearances and deaths. I contacted wildlife experts, described the creature without mentioning the supernatural aspects, asked if any known animal could match the description. The answers were always the same. Nothing in North American wildlife fit the profile. Not even the most aggressive bear or wolf would stalk humans so deliberately, so intelligently. One night, frustrated by the lack of concrete information, I drove to the County Historical Society, hoping their archives might contain something Wainwright's journal had missed. The building was closed, but I had a key, one of the perks of being law enforcement in a small town. I let myself in, flipping on the lights and making my way to the records room. Hours passed as I sifted through dusty boxes of photographs, letters, and newspaper clippings. Most were mundane: harvest festivals, church picnics, the occasional wedding or funeral. Then I found it. In a box labeled simply Miscellaneous, 1890-1910, a faded photograph of 5 men standing in front of the old mill. 4 were smiling, dressed in their Sunday best, but the 5th, standing slightly apart from the others, caught my attention. He was tall, unnaturally so, his face blurred as if he'd moved during the exposure. But it wasn't the blur that made me pause. It was his hands. Even in the grainy photograph, I could see they were wrong. Too long, the fingers tapering to points rather than blunt tips. I turned the photograph over. Someone had written on the back in faded ink, "Mill opening ceremony, left to right, J. Wainwright, T. Pearson, F. Holloway, G. Smith, and the stranger." The stranger. A chill ran through me as I studied the photograph again. Could this be the creature, or something connected to it? Had it once walked among the townsfolk, disguised but not quite human? I pocketed the photograph, intending to show it to Gerald and Ruth. As I was leaving, a noise from the main exhibition hall caught my attention. A soft thump, like something heavy being set down. I froze, listening. The building should have been empty. "Hello?" I called out, my hand moving to my gun. "Anyone there?" No response, just the quiet tick of the old grandfather clock in the corner. I moved cautiously toward the sound, gun drawn. The exhibition hall was dark, the displays of pioneer tools and Native American artifacts casting long shadows in the beam of my flashlight. Nothing seemed out of place, until I noticed the back door, slightly ajar, a cool breeze rustling the papers on the curator's desk. I approached slowly, pushing the door open wider with my foot. Outside, the parking lot was empty save for my cruiser. But there, in the dirt just beyond the door, were those familiar scratches, deep, purposeful, leading away from the building toward the tree line. My heart pounded in my chest. It had been here, in town, watching me, following me. I slammed the door shut, locking it securely, then quickly checked the rest of the building. Nothing else was disturbed, nothing taken. It had come for me, or for what I was finding. It knew I was getting closer to something. Back at my apartment, I laid out everything I'd gathered. Wainwright's journal, the photograph, newspaper clippings of disappearances dating back a century, my own notes from witness interviews. Patterns emerged, connections I hadn't seen before. The creature's hunting cycles seemed to follow a rough 30-year pattern. Periods of intense activity followed by relative quiet. We were in an active phase now, the most aggressive in living memory. But why? What had changed? Was it getting bolder or desperate? I remembered what Gerald had said about the Watchers, the group that had tried to fight it in the 50s. If they had tracked it, studied it, they must have kept records of their own. The next morning, I visited Gerald again, asking about Earl Simmons and any notes he might have left behind. His daughter might know, Gerald suggested. Janice lives over in Millfield now, runs the pharmacy there. I made the hour-long drive to Millfield that afternoon, finding Janice Simmons at the small pharmacy on Main Street. She was wary at first, reluctant to discuss her father's obsession with that thing in the woods, as she called it. It ruined his life, she told me bitterly. Ruined our family. Mom left because of it. Said she couldn't compete with a ghost story. I'm sorry, I said sincerely, but I need to know if he left anything behind. Notes, recordings, anything that might help understand what we're dealing with. Janice sighed, her resistance crumbling. There's a box in my attic. Dad's things. I never could bring myself to throw them out, even though I wanted to. You can look through it, if you think it'll help. The box was large, filled with journals, maps marked with tracking data, even plaster casts of footprints. Earl Simmons had been thorough, methodical in his pursuit of the truth. His journals detailed years of investigation, including interviews with survivors, people who had encountered the creature and lived to tell about it. Most described the same thing, a humanoid figure of impossible proportions, moving with unnatural speed, displaying intelligence beyond any animal. But it was one of the later entries that caught my attention. October 30th, 1958, we found the cave today. Deep in the northern woods, hidden behind a waterfall. The entrance was marked with symbols I've never seen before, old, carved into the stone. Inside, the walls were covered with paintings, ancient, showing the thing, and people worshipping it, bringing it sacrifices. Webb thinks it's been here for thousands of years, that the native tribes knew about it, feared it, called it the hunger that walks. We're going back tomorrow with better equipment, try to document everything. This could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for. There were no more entries after that. According to Gerald, Earl and the others had disappeared the next day. Their equipment was found at the cave entrance, but the men themselves were never seen again. A cave. Symbols. Ancient paintings. This was something new, something none of my other sources had mentioned. Could this be the creature's lair? Its origin? I needed to find that cave, but the northern woods covered hundreds of square miles. Without more specific information, it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. But Earl had mentioned a waterfall. There weren't many in this part of North Dakota, especially ones large enough to conceal a cave entrance. I spread out a topographical map of the area, searching for any indication of significant water features. There, about 20 miles north of town, a small blue line indicating a stream with a notation for a waterfall. It was in a remote area, rarely visited even by the most adventurous hikers. I knew I couldn't go alone. This time I needed backup. People I could trust who wouldn't dismiss what we might find. Rivera was out of the question. He still clung to the bear attack theory, despite mounting evidence to the contrary. But there were others. Madeline had come around after Brianna's rescue, finally accepting that something unnatural was stalking our woods. And there was Rivera's deputy, Marcus Alvarez, who had grown up with local legends and seemed more open to possibilities beyond the ordinary. I approached them separately, sharing what I'd found, asking for their help. Both agreed, though Madeline made me promise we'd go in daylight, well armed, and with clear escape routes planned. We set out early on a Saturday morning, telling Rivera we were following up on reports of poachers in the northern sector. The drive was tense, each of us lost in our own thoughts, aware of the danger we were voluntarily walking into. The hike to the waterfall took nearly 3 hours, the terrain growing steeper and more challenging as we approached. When we finally heard the rush of water ahead, I felt a mix of relief and apprehension. The waterfall itself was modest, perhaps 30 feet high, cascading down a rocky cliff face into a clear pool below. At first glance, there was no sign of a cave or entrance of any kind. Maybe we're in the wrong place, Marcus suggested, scanning the area. Or maybe the cave collapsed over the years. Let's look around, I insisted. It has to be here somewhere. We spread out, searching the cliff face for any opening or unusual formation. It was Madeline who found it, a narrow fissure behind the curtain of water, almost invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Here, she called out, her voice nearly drowned by the rushing water. I think this is it. Marcus and I joined her, examining the opening. It was tight, but passable for a person to squeeze through sideways. And there, carved into the rock beside it, were the symbols Earl had mentioned, strange, angular glyphs that resembled no language I recognized. What do they mean? Marcus asked, tracing one with his finger. No idea, I admitted. But they're a warning. I'd bet my life on it. We hesitated at the entrance, each silently contemplating what might await us inside. Finally, I took a deep breath. I'll go first. If anything happens to me, get out. Don't try to be heroes. Not a chance, Madeline said firmly. We go together or not at all. I nodded, appreciating their loyalty even as I feared for their safety. We switched on our flashlights and, one by one, squeezed through the narrow opening into the unknown. The cave beyond was larger than I expected, the ceiling high enough that our lights couldn't quite reach it. The air was cold and damp, with that same sickly sweet odor I'd encountered before. The creature's scent. Our flashlight beams played across the walls, revealing what Earl had described. Ancient paintings, crude but unmistakable, showing a tall, elongated figure surrounded by human forms in postures of worship or supplication. Other scenes depicted the creature hunting, humans fleeing before it, or being offered to it by robed figures. "My God," Madeline whispered. "How old are these?" "Thousands of years, maybe," I replied, my voice echoing slightly in the cavern. "The native tribes must have known about it, feared it." We moved deeper into the cave, the paintings growing more elaborate, more disturbing. Some showed the creature consuming its victims, absorbing something from them, their essence, their spirit, represented by wisps of color flowing from the humans into the creature. "It's not just eating them," Marcus observed, his voice tight. "It's feeding on something else. Their fear, maybe?" The thought sent a chill through me. What if the creature wasn't just a predator in the conventional sense? What if it fed on emotions as much as flesh? The cave narrowed as we progressed, the ceiling dropping lower, forcing us to hunch over. The air grew heavier, the stench stronger. We were getting closer to something. The passage opened suddenly into another chamber, smaller than the first but with a high, domed ceiling. Unlike the outer cave, this room showed signs of recent use. Fresh scratches marked the walls, and the floor was littered with bones, animal and human, old and new. In the center of the chamber stood a crude altar of piled stones, stained dark with what could only be blood. And on the walls, more paintings, but these were different, not ancient but recent, made with modern paint, depicting modern scenes. The town of Wainwright, the logging road, the cabin, and us. 3 figures, recognizably Madeline, Marcus, and myself, standing at the cave entrance. "It knew we were coming," I breathed, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "It's been watching us all along." "We need to get out of here," Marcus urged, backing toward the passage. "Now," but as we turned to leave, a low, rattling breath echoed through the chamber. The creature stood blocking the exit, its massive frame filling the narrow passage. In the confined space, it seemed even larger, more terrifying. Its skin glistened wetly in the beam of our flashlights, its eyes reflecting the light like a cat's. For a moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, deliberately, it stepped into the chamber. The creature emerged from the shadows, its massive frame stepping into the moonlight. This time I could see it clearly. The beast stood on 2 legs, but its body was still hunched over, its limbs too long, fingers ending in claws that glistened with dark, congealed blood. It locked onto me, and I felt that gut-wrenching fear shoot through me. This was it. No turning back. With every ounce of adrenaline I had left, I ran. I darted through the trees, zigzagging as I went, praying I could lose it. Behind me, I could hear it crashing through the underbrush, its heavy footsteps thudding against the ground like a war drum. I burst through the clearing, spotting my cruiser in the distance. I could make it. I could. A sudden pain shot through my ankle as I tripped over a root. I tumbled to the ground, gasping. The creature was almost upon me. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline surging as I threw myself into the car, fumbling with the keys. My hands shook violently, but I managed to get the engine roaring to life just as it reached me. I slammed the gas pedal, the tires screeching as I tore down the dirt road, glancing in the rearview mirror. The creature stood at the edge of the clearing, but it didn't chase after me. It just watched, its massive form silhouetted against the moonlight, waiting for me to come back. The rest of that night was a blur. I called in the sheriff, but he dismissed my claims, chalking it up to a wild imagination. No one believed me, not even Madeline. I spent hours trying to convince them, to show them the evidence, but they brushed me off. Days turned into weeks. I felt the grip of paranoia tightening around me. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I began to hear whispers among the townsfolk about the disappearances, the legends growing like weeds. They were convinced it was just an animal, just a story. Then one night I caught a break. Madeline got a call about another missing person, a local teen who'd been hiking alone. I bolted into action, determined to find her before it was too late. The sheriff finally relented, sending a small team with me to the last known location. As we hiked into the woods, I led the way, heart pounding with each step. But this time the air felt different, thick with tension, pregnant with dread. When we reached the clearing, I froze. The bodies were gone. All that remained were faint stains on the ground, evidence of what had happened. We searched for hours, calling out the teen's name, but there was no response. Just the quiet rustling of the forest. As we prepared to turn back, I caught sight of something. A flash of white through the trees. "Over there!" I yelled, rushing toward it. The others followed, hearts pounding with hope. We stumbled into another clearing, and there she was, huddled against a tree, shaking and wide-eyed. I rushed over, kneeling beside her. "It's okay, you're safe now," I assured her, even though I wasn't so sure. But before I could get her out, the air shifted again. That same suffocating feeling returned, and we were surrounded. The creature emerged from the trees, dragging something behind it, a body. A primal scream tore through the night. It lunged at us, and I could feel the world closing in. I had to protect the girl. The sheriff shouted orders, but they were lost in the chaos as we scrambled for cover. The creature was faster, stronger, and it caught one of my colleagues before we could even react. The screams echoed through the trees, drowning out everything else. In that moment of pure adrenaline, I remembered the shovel I'd brought from the cruiser. I grabbed it from the ground where I'd dropped it earlier and raced toward the thing, my heart pounding in my ears. With every ounce of strength, I swung the shovel, catching the creature across its side. It let out a horrible screech, the sound reverberating in my bones. But it wasn't enough. It turned, swiping at me with a claw that felt like a freight train. I ducked just in time, feeling the wind from its swipe as it roared in fury. I realized then that this was my chance. I couldn't let fear stop me. I lunged again, the shovel connecting with its neck. The creature staggered, but I pressed on, adrenaline pushing me beyond my limits. With a final desperate swing, I struck its head. It fell to the ground, motionless, the body crumpling in on itself. I stood there, panting, the girl staring at me wide-eyed. Then came the quiet. We'd done it. "Dave fair." I looked around, catching the terrified expressions of my colleagues as they realized what had just happened. The proof of what had haunted our town lay before us. The aftermath was swift. The sheriff ordered a full investigation, though we knew there would be whispers about what we found. There would always be skeptics, always be those who doubted. But I didn't care. I had seen it with my own eyes, and the evidence was there for anyone willing to look. We retrieved the bodies of the victims, laying them to rest while the town struggled to come to terms with the horror lurking in the woods. Months passed, and as the seasons changed, so did the stories. New legends sprung up, but the truth remained hidden beneath the surface. A shadow just out of reach. I still patrol the streets of Wainwright, still answer calls, but a part of me will never forget what happened that night. I keep a close watch on the woods, knowing that sometimes the most terrifying things don't just stay in the dark, and sometimes they linger long after they've been confronted. The cave confrontation with the creature was the turning point. As it advanced on us, I realized we couldn't escape, we had to fight. With Madeline and Marcus backing me, we stood our ground, weapons raised. The creature paused, studying us with those intelligent eyes. It wasn't used to prey that didn't run, that faced it directly. For a moment I thought I saw uncertainty in its gaze. That's when I made my move. I lunged forward, driving my shovel into its chest with all my strength. The creature howled, a sound that shook dust from the cavern ceiling. It swiped at me, catching my shoulder, sending pain lancing through my arm. Marcus fired his weapon, the shots deafening in the confined space. The creature staggered backward, dark fluid seeping from multiple wounds, but it didn't fall. Madeline grabbed one of the flares from her pack, lit it, and hurled it at the beast. The searing light seemed to cause it more pain than the bullets, making it shriek and cover its eyes. "The light!" I shouted. "It hates the light!" We each lit flares, surrounding the creature with burning red light. It cowered, backing toward the wall, making that strange wheezing sound I'd heard before, almost like laughter, but pained now, desperate. With the creature cornered, I approached cautiously, shovel raised for another strike. But before I could reach it, it did something unexpected. It spoke. The sound was garbled, distorted, like someone who hadn't used their voice in centuries trying to form words with a mouth not made for human speech. But the meaning was clear enough. "You cannot end me." I froze, the shovel half raised. "What are you?" It made that laughing sound again. "Older than your kind. I was here first." Why? Why kill so many?" I demanded, anger overriding my fear. "To live. To feed. Your fear sustains." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. It fed on fear as much as flesh. The hunting, the killing, It was all to create terror, to feast on the emotions of its victims and the town. "It ends now," I said firmly. "No more hunting, no more killing." The creature tilted its head, a gesture almost human in its curiosity. "You cannot kill what does not truly live." And then it moved, faster than anything that size should be able to move. It lunged not at us, but at the wall behind it, smashing through what appeared to be solid rock but was actually a thin barrier concealing another passage. Before we could react, it had vanished into the darkness beyond. We pursued cautiously, following the new tunnel as it sloped steeply downward, deeper into the earth. The air grew colder, the stench stronger. The passage opened into a vast cavern, larger than the first, its ceiling lost in darkness above. In the center stood a pool of black, viscous liquid, bubbling slightly though there was no apparent heat source. The creature had reached it, was dragging itself into the pool, its wounds seemingly forgotten. "Stop!" I shouted, rushing forward. But I was too late. The creature submerged itself in the black liquid, disappearing from view. The surface of the pool bubbled more violently, then stilled. Silence fell over the cavern, broken only by our ragged breathing. "Is it gone?" Madeline whispered, moving to stand beside me. "I don't know," I admitted, staring at the now calm surface of the pool. "What is this place?" Marcus knelt at the edge, careful not to touch the liquid. "Look at the rocks around it. They're carved. More symbols, but different from the ones at the entrance." He was right. The stones encircling the pool were etched with complex patterns, a script more refined than the crude pictographs in the outer cave. This was something older, more deliberate. "We need to destroy it," I decided suddenly. "This pool, whatever it is, it's the source, the creature's home, maybe even its origin." "How do we destroy something like this?" Madeline asked, gesturing at the pool. I thought of the flares, how the creature had reacted to the light. "Fire," I said. "We burn it." We gathered everything flammable we could find, our spare clothes, maps, the wooden handles of our tools. Marcus had a small can of lighter fluid he used for his camp stove. It wasn't much, but it might be enough to start. As we prepared our makeshift pyre, the pool began to bubble again, more violently than before. The liquid rose, forming a shape, not the creature we had fought, but something larger, less defined. A mass of darkness that seemed to absorb the light from our flashlights. "Hurry!" I urged as the darkness continued to rise, taking on a vaguely humanoid shape twice the size of the creature we'd encountered. We threw our bundle onto the surface of the pool and lit it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the flames caught, spreading across the surface of the liquid with surprising speed. The darkness shrieked, a sound that drove needles of pain into my skull. The cavern shook, rocks falling from the ceiling, splashing into the burning pool. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Madeline and Marcus by the arms. "The whole place is coming down." We fled back up the tunnel, the sounds of destruction echoing behind us. We barely made it out of the cave before the entrance collapsed, sending a cloud of dust billowing across the clearing. We stood there, coughing and stunned, watching as the ground over the cavern subsided, trees tilting at odd angles as the earth settled. "Is it over?" Madeline asked, her voice small in the aftermath. I stared at the collapsed entrance, the fallen trees, the disturbed earth. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But we've heard it at least. Maybe enough to make a difference." We made our way back to town, exhausted and battered but alive. Rivera was waiting at the station, his face a mask of fury and concern. "Where the hell have you been?" he demanded. "There's been an earthquake or something up north. Half the town felt it. And you three look like you've been through a war." I exchanged glances with Madeline and Marcus, a silent agreement passing between us. Some truths were too fantastic, too dangerous to share widely. "Just checking out those reports of poachers," I said casually. "Got caught in a rock slide when the tremors hit. Lucky to get out alive." Rivera didn't believe me. I could see it in his eyes. But he didn't press the issue. Maybe he'd finally realized there were some questions better left unasked in Wainwright. In the weeks that followed, a strange peace settled over the town. The disappearances stopped. The feeling of being watched, of something lurking just beyond the tree line, faded. People began to relax, to venture into the woods again without fear. I kept my vigil, patrolling the forest edge each night, watching for any sign of the creature's return. But the woods remained quiet, ordinary. Had we killed it, trapped it, or merely wounded it, sent it into hibernation to heal and return decades later, as it had done before? I didn't know, and the uncertainty gnawed at me. I became the keeper of Wainwright's darkest secret, the guardian against a threat most people preferred to forget or deny. Madeline and Marcus moved on eventually. Madeline to a dispatch position in a larger town, Marcus to the state police. But before they left, we made a pact. If it ever returned, if the signs appeared again, we would reunite, finish what we'd started. I stayed, unable to leave, unwilling to abandon my post. On quiet nights, I would drive up to the logging road, park near the collapsed cave entrance, and listen. Not just with my ears, but with that other sense the creature had awakened in me, the ability to feel when something unnatural was near. Most nights, there was nothing. Just the usual sounds of the forest, the wind in the trees, animals going about their business. But sometimes, when the moon was dark and the stars seemed distant, I thought I could hear something. A faint wheezing breath, like laughter. A reminder that some things can never truly be destroyed, only contained, temporarily beaten back by the light. On those nights, I would return to town, check the locks on my doors and windows, and prepare, for I knew that although we had won a battle, the war was far from over. The creature, or others like it, would return someday, drawn by our fear, our vulnerability, and when it did, I would be waiting. That's the story of what happened in Wainwright. Not the official version, not the sanitized tale the county puts in its records. The truth as I lived it, as I continue to live it every day. So if you're ever passing through our little town, pay attention to the locals' warnings. Stay out of the woods after dark. Don't go looking for the old logging road or the collapsed cave. Some secrets are best left buried, some stories best left untold. But if you hear something in the night, a sound like laughter that isn't quite human, don't run. It only makes the hunt more exciting for it. Stand your ground, face it directly. It's the fear it wants most of all. And remember this. Not all monsters hide under the bed or in the closet. Some walk among us, wearing masks of normalcy, and some wait in the darkness of the woods, patient and hungry, for those foolish enough to venture where they don't belong. Senior Forest Ranger Gary Dunmore, Badge 4728, Official Report, Gallatin National Forest, September 1999. That's how I should begin this account according to protocol, but no one would believe the official version anyway. So let me tell you what really happened out there. I had been working in Montana's Gallatin National Forest for a while, 10 years to be exact, when things started going sideways. The year was 1999, and you could say I was comfortable in my routine. I had always been more at home outdoors than indoors, and my job made that easy. There's something about the open wilderness with its sprawling acres of pine and aspen that just clears your head. But don't let anyone fool you, the job wasn't exactly a walk in the park. Sure, most days it were quiet, just the odd camper getting lost or a bear wandering too close to a trailhead. Then you have days like this one, the kind that make you think, why did I ever sign up for this in the first place? That Tuesday started like any other. I arrived at the ranger station just as the September sun was beginning to crest over the eastern ridge. The air had that crisp, pine-scented quality that always reminded me why I chose this life. The station was quiet. Just me and Ellie, the admin assistant who kept the place running while rangers like me tramped through the forest. Got a strange call this morning, Ellie said without looking up from her computer. Hikers near Specimen Creek reported hearing screams in the night. I sipped my coffee. Probably coyotes, or maybe a mountain lion took down an elk. That's what I thought too, but then we got another call. Family of 4 was supposed to check in at the Eagle Creek campground yesterday, never showed. That caught my attention. Eagle Creek was remote but not treacherous. Families went there all the time. Maybe they changed plans, I offered. But even as I said it, a familiar unease settled in my stomach. 10 years in these woods had taught me to trust my instincts. Ellie handed me the report. That's not all. 2 backpackers who were supposed to come off the trail yesterday never checked back in with their emergency contact. The unease deepened. One missing group could be explained away, but 2 separate parties? That was unusual. I'll head out there, check the Eagle Creek area first. I gathered my gear, standard procedure, radio, first aid kit, topographic maps, compass, survival rations, flashlight, and my 35-7 revolver. Some rangers preferred not to carry, but in my experience, the weight of the gun was worth the security it provided. Don't forget your sat phone, Ellie called as I headed for the door. Cell service is spotty out by Eagle Creek, and with those storms coming in, I patted my pack. Already packed, I'll check in every 2 hours. The drive to the Eagle Creek trailhead took just over an hour on winding forest roads. I parked my Forest Service truck under the shadow of towering lodgepole pines and stepped out into the wilderness. The parking area was empty except for a dusty blue Subaru with Colorado plates. I checked the registration against the list of missing hikers, a match for the backpacker couple Jason and Miranda Holt. I pulled out my radio. "Base, this is Dunmore. I'm at Eagle Creek Trailhead. Found the Holt's vehicle. Starting my sweep now. Copy that, Gary. Be careful out there. Forecast says storms rolling in by nightfall." I glanced at the sky. Clear blue for now, but in mountain country, weather could turn in minutes. The trail started, as most do in this part of Gallatin. Well maintained, wide enough for two people to walk side by side. But I knew that would change. Eagle Creek Trail eventually narrows, climbing through dense forest before opening into alpine meadows. It's breathtaking but unforgiving to the unprepared. 2 hours into my hike, the forest's character began to change. The cheerful birdsong that had accompanied the first leg of my journey faded. The trees grew thicker, blocking much of the sunlight. Even the breeze seemed to die, leaving the air stagnant and heavy. I've always been sensitive to the moods of the forest. Some rangers laugh at the notion, but I believe the wilderness speaks if you know how to listen. And right now, it was telling me something was wrong. At a small stream crossing, I found the first sign of trouble: a hiking boot, half submerged in the shallow water. Men's size 11, well worn. I photographed it before retrieving it. No blood, no signs of struggle, just an abandoned boot where no boot should be. I continued upward, the trail growing steeper. My radio crackled with static as I checked in with base. Ellie's voice came through broken and distant. "Gary, signal, breaking up, report. I found a boot by the creek crossing. Continuing to Eagle Creek campsite. Will report back in 2 hours." More static then. "Careful. Reports of strange." The transmission died completely. I tried again, adjusting the frequency, but got nothing but white noise. The sat phone showed no service. Unusual, but not unheard of in the deeper valleys. As afternoon stretched toward evening, the forest grew impossibly quiet. No birds, no insects buzzing, not even the rustle of small animals in the underbrush. Just silence, thick and oppressive. In a place usually teeming with life, the stillness was unnerving. I reached a ridge that overlooked the Eagle Creek Basin and paused to catch my breath. From this vantage point, I could see the campground, a small clearing beside the creek, surrounded by dense forest on 3 sides. Even from a distance, I could tell something was wrong. The campsite looked disturbed. The sky darkened above me, clouds rolling in faster than forecasted. The first droplets of rain began to fall as I made my descent toward the campground, my pace quickening with each step. 10 years I'd been working these woods, and never had I felt such a profound sense of dread. As I approached the campsite, the rain intensified, drumming against the canopy above. Lightning flashed in the distance, momentarily illuminating the scene before me. What I saw made me stop dead in my tracks. The family's tent was shredded, as if something had torn through it with impossible force. Sleeping bags and personal items were scattered across the muddy ground. A child's stuffed animal lay soaking in a puddle, its once white fur now stained dark with what I desperately hoped was just mud. But what caught my eye, what made my blood run cold, was the series of deep gouges in the earth around the campsite. Not bear tracks, not mountain lion. These were something else entirely, elongated depressions that reminded me of footprints but distorted, as if whatever made them walked on 2 legs but had the feet of something inhuman. I drew my revolver, suddenly aware of how inadequate it might be against whatever had done this. "Hello?" I called out, my voice swallowed by the rain and thunder. "Forest Service, is anyone here?" No answer came. But as lightning flashed again, I swore I saw movement at the edge of the trees. Something tall, something watching, and then it was gone, leaving me alone in the rain with the wreckage of the campsite and a growing certainty that whatever I was dealing with was beyond my experience, beyond anything in the Ranger Handbook. Night was falling fast, and I faced a decision: push on in darkness or make camp and continue the search at first light. Every instinct told me to leave this place, to radio for backup and return with a full search party. But I couldn't. Not with the family missing. Not with those strange tracks still fresh in the mud. I set up my emergency shelter beneath an overhang of rock, where I could keep watch on the campsite while staying relatively dry. As darkness engulfed the forest, I loaded my revolver and placed it beside my sleeping bag, within easy reach. Sleep was impossible. Every crack of thunder, every whisper of wind through the trees set my nerves on edge. And all through the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched by something hiding just beyond the reach of my flashlight's beam, something that was waiting for me to make a mistake. Dawn broke gray and miserable, the storm having passed but leaving behind a landscape shrouded in mist. I'd managed perhaps 2 hours of fitful sleep, jolting awake at every sound. My neck was stiff, my clothes damp despite the shelter, and the unease that had settled in my stomach had only grown stronger overnight. I packed my gear quickly, eager to continue the search while daylight was on my side. The campsite looked even worse in the harsh morning light, the violence of whatever had happened more apparent. Blood spatter, which I'd missed in the rain and darkness, was visible on the shredded tent fabric. Not much, but enough to confirm my fears that the family had met with something terrible. I tried the radio again. Still nothing but static. The sat phone showed a single bar of service, weak, but better than nothing. I dialed the ranger station. "Ellie, it's Gary. Can you hear me?" Her voice came through broken but audible. "Gary? Thank God. We've been trying to reach you since yesterday. I'm at Eagle Creek campsite. There's been some kind of attack. The family's tent is destroyed and there's blood. No sign of bodies, but..." I hesitated, unsure how to describe what I'd found. "The tracks here are unlike anything I've seen before." "What do you mean?" "They're not animal tracks, at least not any animal I recognize. They look almost human, but distorted. Too large. And there's something else." I lowered my voice, feeling foolish even as I said it. "The forest is wrong, Ellie. Dead silent. No birds, no insects, nothing." Static filled the line for a moment, then Ellie's voice returned. "Gary, listen to me. We've had 3 more reports of missing hikers since yesterday, all in the Eagle Creek area. The sheriff's department is organizing a search party, but they won't be there until this afternoon at the earliest." My heart sank. "I can't wait that long. There's a child's stuffed animal here, Ellie. A family with kids is out there somewhere. Just be careful. And Gary, one of the reports mentioned strange howling sounds, not like wolves. The caller said it sounded almost like human screams mixed with animal noises." A chill ran down my spine. "I'll check in again when I can. Tell the search party to look for my markers." I ended the call and took a deep breath, surveying the campsite one more time. The strange tracks led away from the camp, heading deeper into the forest, toward a section of Gallatin that even experienced rangers rarely ventured into. The locals called it the Deadfall, a region where lightning strikes had created a natural labyrinth of fallen trees and jagged terrain. Following the tracks, I moved cautiously through the forest, marking my trail with bright orange surveyor's tape. The ground was soft from the rain, making the tracks easier to follow, but also making my own progress slower as I sank ankle-deep into mud with each step. An hour into my trek, I found a backpack hanging from a branch, about 7 feet off the ground. Too high for someone to have placed it there normally. I recognized it from the description of the missing backpacker's gear, a distinctive red North Face pack with Colorado avalanche patches. Inside were typical hiking supplies, granola bars, water purification tablets, a map of Gallatin marked with a planned route, and a journal. I flipped through the pages, finding daily entries written in a neat feminine hand, Miranda Holt, presumably. The entries were mundane hiking observations until the final one dated just 2 days prior. Sep 7, made camp near Eagle Creek. Beautiful spot, but something feels off. Jason says I'm imagining things, but I swear we're being watched. Found strange marks on trees this morning, not bear scratches, something else. 3 parallel lines, too precise for animal claws, about 7 feet up the trunk. Jason thinks it's other hikers playing games, but out here, we're at least 15 miles from the nearest trail junction. Heard weird noises last night. Not wolves, not coyotes, almost sounded like words, but distorted. Jay thinks I'm scaring myself, but I've been hiking these mountains for 10 years. Never felt like this before. If anything happens to us, we were last at coordinates 45-1732.8 and 111-0346.2 DW. The coordinates matched approximately where I'd found the backpack. I tucked the journal into my own pack and continued following the tracks, which were becoming increasingly erratic, as if whatever made them had started moving faster, more frantically. By midday, I'd reached the edge of the deadfall. The tracks led straight into the maze of fallen trees and dense undergrowth. I hesitated, knowing that entering such terrain alone was against protocol, but the thought of that child's stuffed animal kept pushing me forward. The deadfall lived up to its reputation. Massive trees lay crisscrossed like pickup sticks, creating natural tunnels and barriers. Navigating it required climbing over moss-covered trunks and squeezing through narrow gaps. The canopy above was so thick that even at midday it felt like dusk inside, and it was here that I began to notice the smell. That same rotten odor I'd caught hints of at the campsite, but stronger now. A putrid mix of decay and something musky, almost like wet dog but far more pungent. It clung to the back of my throat, making each breath unpleasant. The tracks changed too. Whatever had been moving on two legs now seemed to alternate between bipedal movement and running on all fours, the impressions deeper, more urgent. In some places, the forest floor was torn up as if in a frenzy. I came to a small clearing where a shaft of sunlight penetrated the canopy, illuminating a scene that stopped me cold. Scraps of clothing hung from branches, a child's blue jacket, a woman's hiking pants, torn and bloodied, and on the ground a man's wallet, open to reveal a driver's license. The face of Jason Holt stared up at me, smiling in his photo, unaware of the fate that awaited him in Gallatin Forest. But still no bodies. I photographed everything, marking the spot on my GPS. The search party would need to process this scene properly. As I knelt to examine a particularly deep set of tracks, something warm dripped onto the back of my neck. I froze, then slowly raised my hand to touch it. My fingers came away red. Looking up, I saw what I'd missed when entering the clearing. A dark mass wedged in the crook of a tree about 15 feet above me. At first, I thought it might be a bear's food cache, but as my eyes adjusted to the gloom, I recognized the unmistakable shape of a human leg. The jeans still intact, but the flesh below the knee, gone. My stomach lurched. In 15 years of search and rescue, including 10 in Gallatin, I'd seen my share of gruesome sights. Hikers who'd fallen from cliffs, hunters mauled by wounded bears, even the aftermath of a small plane crash. But this was different. This felt calculated, methodical. The way the remains were positioned suggested they had been placed there deliberately, not simply dragged up by a predator. I backed away, drawing my revolver. The forest had gone completely silent again, that unnatural stillness that raised the hair on my neck. I had the distinct sensation of being watched, studied. A twig snapped somewhere to my left. I whirled, gun raised, peering into the dense tangle of fallen trees. Nothing moved, but the feeling of being observed intensified. "Forest Service," I called out, my voice sounding small in the vastness of the deadfall. "Identify yourself." Only silence answered. I began to back away, intending to retreat to more open ground where I'd have better visibility. My foot caught on a root, and I stumbled slightly. In that moment of distraction, something moved at the edge of my vision, just a blur of motion, gone before I could turn fully toward it. But it had been large. Much larger than a person. Heart pounding, I continued my careful retreat, keeping my back to a massive fallen pine. The smell was overwhelming now, so strong I could taste it, and underneath it something else, a low, barely audible sound. Not quite a growl, not quite breathing, a rumbling vibration that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. I needed to get out of the deadfall, to reach higher ground where my radio might work. The search party would be assembling by now. Safety in numbers. As I plotted my escape route, my eyes caught something carved into the trunk of a nearby tree. 3 parallel lines, deep enough to have gouged into the heartwood. Exactly as Miranda Holt had described in her journal. They were fresh, the exposed wood still oozing sap. I reached out to touch the marks, trying to make sense of them. They were too uniform, too precise to be random. They meant something, a marking of territory perhaps, or a warning. The rumbling sound grew louder, and with shocking suddenness, a howl split the silence, a sound so utterly wrong it defied description. It began like a wolf's call but twisted halfway through into something that approximated human screaming, then devolved into a series of guttural clicks and growls. It came from directly behind me. I spun, raising my gun, and caught my first clear glimpse of what had been stalking me through the deadfall. It stood partly concealed behind a fallen tree, but I could see enough. Enough to know that what I was facing wasn't supposed to exist. The creature was tall, 7, maybe 8 feet at full height, with a frame that suggested a twisted parody of the human form. But any resemblance to humanity ended there. Its limbs were disproportionately long, jointed in ways that seemed all wrong. The skin visible through patches of matted gray-brown fur was pale and stretched taut, as if barely containing whatever lay beneath. But it was the face that would haunt my nightmares for years to come. Elongated like a wolf's muzzle, but with disturbingly human eyes. Intelligent, calculating eyes that fixed on me with unmistakable hunger. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of jagged teeth, and from that grotesque maw came another of those impossible howls. I fired without conscious thought, the revolver's report deafening in the enclosed space. The creature jerked back, a dark stain spreading across its shoulder, but it didn't fall. Instead, it let out a sound like laughter, a horrible, broken imitation of human mirth, and began to move toward me with that same unnatural gait I'd glimpsed before. Too fast for something so large. Too deliberate for a wounded animal. I fired again. And again. 3 shots in rapid succession, at least one finding its mark in the creature's chest. It staggered but kept coming, closing the distance with horrifying speed. 5 rounds fired. 1 left in the chamber. I turned and ran. Running through the deadfall was like navigating a nightmare obstacle course. Fallen trees blocked my path at every turn, forcing me to scramble over moss-slicked trunks and squeeze through narrow gaps between massive roots. Behind me, the creature pursued with a terrible efficiency, moving through the labyrinth as if it had memorized every inch. My breath came in ragged gasps, my pack bouncing painfully against my back with each leap and scramble. I dropped my flashlight somewhere in the panic, leaving me with only filtered daylight to guide my escape. The forest blurred around me, a chaotic jumble of browns and greens interrupted by the bright orange of my trail markers. The markers. I was following my own path out of the deadfall, but in doing so I was taking a predictable route. The creature seemed to realize this too. Twice I heard it crashing through the underbrush to my right, paralleling my course, trying to cut me off. It was hurting me. The realization sent ice through my veins. This wasn't a mindless predator operating on instinct. There was calculation behind its movements, a strategy that spoke of intelligence. I veered sharply left, abandoning my marked trail and plunging into uncharted territory. The gamble might cost me. Getting lost in the deadfall could be a death sentence, but continuing on a predictable path seemed the greater risk. My change in direction bought me seconds at most. I could hear the creature adjusting its course, its movements more frenzied now, punctuated by those horrible howls that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I burst through a tangle of dead branches into a small ravine slick with mud and last night's rain. My boots lost traction, and I went down hard, sliding several yards before slamming into a fallen log. Pain shot through my right side, not broken ribs, but badly bruised at minimum. No time to assess the damage. I scrambled to my feet, checking my revolver. 1 round left. Behind me, the crashing sounds grew closer. The ravine offered a natural path, and I followed it downhill, hoping it would lead to the creek. Water meant wider trails, possible access points for the search party that should be arriving soon. If I could just hold out until a shadow fell across my path as something massive leapt from the bank above, landing with bone-jarring force just yards ahead of me. The creature rose to its full height, blocking the narrow ravine completely. In the filtered light, I could see it more clearly now. The grotesque fusion of wolf and human features, the unnatural angles of its limbs, the intelligence burning in eyes that should have belonged to a predator but somehow reflected a terrible awareness. Blood matted its fur where my bullets had struck, but the wounds seemed to have done little to slow it down. If anything, they'd only enraged it. I raised my revolver, knowing the single remaining round was unlikely to stop what 5 hadn't, but unwilling to die without a fight. The creature cocked its head, studying me with an almost curious expression. Then it did something that chilled me more deeply than any howl or snarl could have. It smiled, not the mindless baring of teeth that an animal might display, but a deliberate, knowing expression that had no business on a face so inhuman. And when it spoke, because yes, God help me, it spoke. The sound was like gravel being crushed, like words forced through vocal cords never meant for human language. Run-ner, it growled, the word broken but unmistakable. Good, run-ner. My hand shook, the revolver suddenly seeming small and useless. What are you? I managed to ask, my voice steadier than I felt. The creature's grin widened, exposing rows of yellowed fangs. Hungry, it replied, and lunged. I fired my last round directly at its face. At that range I couldn't miss. The bullet struck just below its right eye, tearing through flesh and bone with a wet, sickening sound. The creature reeled back, howling in pain and rage, clawed hands clutching at its ruined face. I didn't wait to see more. I bolted past it while it was disoriented, splashing through the muddy bottom of the ravine with renewed desperation. The terrain was working in my favor now, the slope growing steeper, allowing me to pick up speed. Behind me, the howls transformed into something worse, a high, keening wail that sounded disturbingly like a child in pain, then shifted again into that horrible approximation of laughter. The sounds echoed through the deadfall, seeming to come from multiple directions at once. It was playing with me. The ravine widened, the walls growing less steep, and I could see glimpses of more open forest ahead. I was nearing the edge of the deadfall. If I could reach clearer ground, I might have a chance. My empty revolver was useless as a weapon now. but I kept it in hand anyway, a pointless comfort. The forest opened up suddenly, the dense tangle of fallen trees giving way to a sloping meadow dotted with stunted pines. Eagle Creek glinted in the afternoon sun about 200 yards downhill. Beyond it, the regular forest trail would lead back to civilization, to safety. I allowed myself a moment of hope. It lasted approximately 3 seconds. The creature burst from the deadfall behind me, no longer bothering with stealth. In the open daylight, it was even more horrifying, a twisted amalgamation that should not exist. Blood streamed from its wounded face, but it moved with undiminished speed, eating up the distance between us with each bounding stride. I ran as I'd never run before, the meadow grass whipping against my legs, my lungs burning with each desperate breath. The creek drew closer, tantalizingly within reach. I could see the trail marker on the far bank, the familiar Forest Service sign pointing toward the campground, 50 yards to the creek. 40, 30, something whistled past my ear. A rock, I realized, hurled with devastating accuracy. Another followed, striking me between the shoulder blades with enough force to make me stumble. The creature was throwing rocks, trying to bring me down from a distance. Tool use? Christ! I reached the creek bank and leapt, clearing the narrow waterway in a single desperate jump. My landing was clumsy, sending pain shooting through my already bruised ribs, but I maintained my footing and kept moving. The trail stretched before me, a clear path through the trees. That's when I made my mistake. I looked back. The creature had stopped at the edge of the creek, its massive form quivering with what seemed like frustration. It paced back and forth along the bank, snarling and howling, but made no move to cross the water. It couldn't or wouldn't cross the creek. This realization gave me a second wind. I continued along the trail, maintaining distance but no longer in blind panic. The creature followed on its side of the creek, paralleling my course, those intelligent eyes never leaving me. Whenever the trail curved closer to the water, it would lunge forward, as if testing an invisible boundary, only to pull back with frustrated growls. After what seemed like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, I heard the most beautiful sound imaginable, human voices calling my name, the distinctive crackle of Forest Service radios. The search party had arrived. The creature heard them too. It froze, head cocked toward the sounds, then turned those terrible eyes on me one last time. The look it gave me wasn't the mindless anger of a thwarted predator. It was a promise that our business was unfinished. Then it melted into the forest with a silence that seemed impossible for something so large, leaving nothing but trampled grass and a lingering sense of wrongness behind. Minutes later, I stumbled into the arms of the search party. 3 fellow rangers and 2 sheriff's deputies, all armed, all wearing expressions that shifted from relief to concern as they took in my mud-caked, blood-spattered appearance. Jesus, Gary, what happened to you? Mark Tanner, the senior ranger, gripped my shoulders, his eyes wide with shock. I opened my mouth to tell them everything, but the words wouldn't come. How could I describe what I'd seen? Who would believe me? Animal attack. I managed instead. Big, some kind of wolf maybe. It killed the missing hikers. There's evidence in the deadfall. I marked the trail. The others exchanged glances. I could read their thoughts clearly enough. Stress, trauma, maybe even a concussion causing me to misinterpret what I'd seen. We need to get you to a hospital, one of the deputies said, already reaching for his radio to call for evacuation. I shook my head, wincing at the pain the movement caused. No, we need to find the family, the kids. My voice broke. The creature has them, or their bodies, in the deadfall. Mark's expression grew more concerned. Gary, we found the family an hour ago. They're fine. Got turned around on the trail yesterday and spent the night in one of the emergency shelters near Specimen Ridge, miles from Eagle Creek. I stared at him, unable to process this information. But the campsite, the destroyed tent, the blood, we checked it out. Looks like a bear got into their gear after they left. Probably attracted by the food they stored improperly. He squeezed my shoulder gently. You've been through hell, buddy. Let's get you looked at. I let them lead me back toward the trailhead, too exhausted and confused to argue. But as we walked, I couldn't shake the memory of those intelligent eyes, that grotesque smile, the words spoken in a voice that shouldn't have been capable of human speech. The creature was still out there, and it had called me a runner. Like this wasn't over. Like this was just the beginning of a hunt. They took me to Bozeman Deaconess Hospital, where doctors treated me for exhaustion, mild hypothermia, bruised ribs, and various cuts and scrapes. Physically, I was in better shape than expected. Mentally was another story. I spent the night under observation, drifting in and out of restless sleep, plagued by dreams of being pursued through endless forests by something I couldn't quite see. Each time I woke, sweating and disoriented, the night nurse would offer reassurances and sometimes sedatives, which I refused. I needed to keep my mind clear. Morning brought Sheriff Tom Hadley, a man I'd worked with many times over the years. He sat beside my bed, notebook in hand, face carefully arranged in an expression of professional concern that didn't quite hide his skepticism. "How you feeling, Gary?" he asked, flipping his notebook open, like I was chased through the woods by a monster. I replied flatly. Hadley's mouth tightened. "Yeah, about that. I need to get your official statement about what happened out there." For the next hour, I recounted everything: the destroyed campsite, the strange tracks, the human remains in the tree, the creature that pursued me. I described its appearance in detail, its unnatural movements, the way it spoke. Throughout my account, Hadley's expression grew increasingly troubled. When I finished, he closed his notebook slowly. "That's quite a story, Gary." "It's not a story. It's what happened." "Okay." He nodded, but I could see he didn't believe me. "Here's what we know for sure. The Robertson family, the ones you thought were missing, are fine. They abandoned their campsite when they saw signs of bear activity and hiked to the emergency shelter. Smart move on their part." "And the backpackers? The Holts?" Hadley sighed. "Still missing. We've got search teams combing the area, including the deadfall, following your markers. So far they've found no sign of bodies, no blood evidence, nothing like what you described." "What about the backpack? The journal?" "We found a backpack matching your description, but no journal inside. Just standard hiking gear." I sat up straighter, ignoring the pain in my ribs. "That's impossible. I read it myself. Miranda Holt wrote about being watched, about marks on trees." "Gary." Hadley cut me off gently. "We found no journal, no marks on trees like you described, and no remains in any tree. What we did find were bear tracks all through the area. Big ones." "It wasn't a bear," I insisted, hearing the desperation in my voice. "Bears don't stand 7 feet tall. They don't throw rocks. They don't speak." Hadley was silent for a long moment. "You took a nasty fall in that ravine. Possible concussion, combined with exhaustion, being alone in the woods." He let the implication hang in the air. "You think I hallucinated all this?" He shifted uncomfortably. "The doctors mentioned you've been under a lot of stress lately. 10 years in the same forest, seeing the same tragedies play out. It takes a toll." I laughed bitterly. "So that's the official line. Ranger Dunmore had a breakdown in the woods, saw a bear and turned it into some kind of monster?" "No one's saying breakdown, Gary, but trauma, stress, they can make us see things differently." He stood, tucking his notebook away. "Take some time off, doctor's orders anyway. With those ribs, we'll handle the search for the Holts." After he left, I lay back, staring at the ceiling tiles. Was it possible? Could stress and a minor head injury explain what I'd experienced? The rational part of my mind wanted to believe it. A neat explanation that didn't require accepting the existence of monsters in Gallatin Forest. But I knew what I'd seen, what I'd heard. The memory of that unnatural voice forming human words was too vivid, too specific to be hallucination. They discharged me the following day with a prescription for pain medication and strict instructions to rest. Mark Tanner drove me home, filling the car with well-intentioned small talk that I barely registered. My apartment in Bozeman felt alien after the intensity of the forest. Too quiet, too normal, too safe. That night, I spread my Forest Service maps across the kitchen table, tracing the area where I'd encountered the creature. The deadfall was a remote section of Gallatin, rarely visited even by experienced rangers. I pulled out older maps, historical surveys, looking for anything unusual about the region. In a survey from 1932, I found a notation near the deadfall. "Local trappers avoid. Reports of strange sounds, missing persons, likely natural explanations, avalanche conditions, unstable terrain." I dug deeper, requesting archival records from the Forest Service Regional Office. They arrived 3 days later. Incident reports, survey notes, even personal journals from early rangers dating back to the establishment of Gallatin National Forest. Most were mundane administrative details, but scattered throughout were references to the area around the deadfall. 1898. Trapper McHenry refuses to set lines near East Fork of Eagle Creek, claims something unnatural hunts there, more likely competing trappers sabotaging his lines. 1917. 3 loggers missing near Specimen Ridge. Search found camp destroyed. Unusual tracks. Blamed on grizzly. 1943. Ranger Wilcox reports wolf-like creature of unusual size near Eagle Creek. Counseled about appropriate language in official reports, 1976. Hiker found wandering delirious near deadfall. Claims pursued by man-wolf, hospitalized for exposure and hallucinations. A pattern emerged across decades, strange encounters written off as hallucinations, hysteria, or mistaken identity. Always near the deadfall. Always involving some description of a creature that was neither fully wolf nor fully human. I wasn't the first. A week into my mandatory leave, the search for the Holts was scaled back. No bodies had been found, no blood evidence, nothing to suggest foul play. The official theory became that they had wandered off trail and succumbed to exposure, their bodies perhaps dragged away by scavengers. I knew better. I began spending my days at the local library, researching cryptozoology, folklore, any accounts of wolf-like creatures that walked like men. Most of what I found was predictable: werewolf legends, skinwalker myths from Native American traditions, cryptid sightings that never amounted to evidence. But in a dusty anthropology text about the indigenous peoples who had inhabited the Gallatin Valley before white settlement, I found something that made my blood run cold. The Blackfeet and Crow peoples shared legends of a creature they called Shunka Warikan, Crow, or Omaha Sheepa, Blackfeet, roughly translated as carries off dogs or dogman. According to oral traditions, this being appeared as a large wolf but could walk upright and was known for its cunning, often imitating human speech to lure victims. Unlike ordinary predators, it was said to have a particular hatred for humans who encroached on its territory. Both tribes considered the region near what is now Eagle Creek to be spiritually dangerous, a place where the boundary between the natural and supernatural world was thin. The text included a crude drawing based on a 19th century Crow pictograph. A tall, bipedal figure with a wolf-like head, elongated limbs, and 3 parallel lines across its chest, identical to the markings I'd seen carved into trees. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't hallucinating. The creature had a name, a history. 2 weeks after my encounter, I received a call from Sheriff Hadley. His voice was tight, controlled. "We found something. Can you come to the station?" I arrived to find Hadley looking haggard, as if he hadn't slept in days. Without a word, he led me to an evidence room where photos were spread across a table. They showed what remained of a campsite deep in the deadfall, a site our search teams had somehow missed initially. "Forestry students found it yesterday," Hadley explained, his earlier skepticism notably absent. "They were doing some field research, went off trail more than our search teams did." The photos showed a scene of methodical destruction, gear torn apart, blood spattered across rocks and tree trunks. And something else. 3 parallel lines carved into multiple trees surrounding the site. "We found personal effects," Hadley continued, his voice flat. "Driver's licenses for Jason and Miranda Holt. And this." He pushed a plastic evidence bag toward me. Inside was a small digital camera, its case cracked but the memory card intact. Hadley tapped a laptop on the table. "We downloaded the images. Most are just typical vacation shots, scenery, selfies on the trail. But the last ones," he turned the laptop so I could see the screen, then clicked through a series of photos. The final images were blurry, taken in obvious panic. But one frame had captured something at the edge of the frame. A tall, shadowy figure partially hidden behind a tree. Even in the poor quality image, I could make out the elongated limbs, the unnatural stance. "That's not a bear," Hadley said quietly. "I don't know what it is, but that's not a bear." I felt a grim vindication. "Now do you believe me?" Hadley rubbed his face wearily. "I don't know what to believe, but I know we've got 2 missing hikers, blood evidence that suggests violence, and something on camera that doesn't match any known animal. It's what I described, exactly what I described, maybe." He didn't sound convinced, but no longer dismissive either. "We're bringing in wildlife experts from the state, expanding the search again." "It won't help," I said. "That thing is smart, Hadley. It knows the forest better than we do, and it's been there a long time." "What are you suggesting? That we've got some kind of, cryptid, werewolf?" He looked embarrassed even saying the words. "I'm saying we have something dangerous in Gallatin Forest. Something that's killed before and will kill again." I tapped the photos. The Blackfeet and Crow avoided that area for generations. Maybe they had good reason. Hadley studied me for a long moment. "Your leave ends next week, right? Planning to come back?" The question caught me off guard. Was I? Could I return to those forests knowing what lurked in their depths? The ranger station would expect me back at my post, returning to normal duties as if nothing had happened. "Yes," I said finally. "I'm coming back." He nodded slowly. "Be careful out there, Gary. Whatever this is, just be careful." As I left the sheriff's office, I felt a strange mix of vindication and dread. The evidence had begun to support my account, but that only confirmed the terrible reality. The creature was real. It was out there, hunting in my forest, and somehow, I knew it was waiting for me to return. My first day back at the ranger station was surreal. Everything looked the same worn desk, the same maps on the walls, the same view of the mountains through the window, but nothing felt the same. Every shadow seemed deeper, every sound from the forest more ominous. Ellie greeted me with careful cheerfulness, clearly having been warned not to mention my episode in the deadfall. "Good to have you back, Gary," she said, sliding a stack of reports across my desk. "Nothing too exciting while you were gone. Couple of lost hikers, minor bear incident near the campground. Any news on the Holtz?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Her smile faltered. "No. Search is ongoing, but..." She didn't finish the sentence. We both knew what the silence meant. I spent the morning catching up on paperwork, going through the motions of normalcy while my mind remained in the deadfall, with the creature. During my leave, I'd continued my research, combing through old newspapers, speaking with tribal elders from the Crow Reservation who shared stories their grandparents had told them about the Shunka. I'd even contacted a cryptozoologist from the University of Montana, though his enthusiasm for my account had made me regret reaching out. What I needed wasn't academic interest, it was understanding, and perhaps a way to end the threat. 2 days into my return, Mark Tanner stopped by my desk, concern evident in his expression. "Sheriff Hadley tells me you're still convinced about this creature you encountered." I met his gaze steadily. "Because it's real, Mark. The camera from the Holtz campsite shows something unusual, yes. Could be a bear standing up, could be a shadow, could be digital distortion." He sighed. "Look, Gary, no one doubts you encountered something traumatic out there. But this theory about some kind of prehistoric predator or cryptid, I know how it sounds. Then you understand why people are concerned. Your experience, your expertise, we value that. But this fixation," he lowered his voice, "there's talk about psychological evaluation before you're cleared for solo patrols again." The word stung but didn't surprise me. Of course they thought I was unstable. Who wouldn't? A veteran ranger claiming to have encountered a mythical beast that spoke English and hunted humans. "I'm fine, Mark. Just give me time to get back in the routine." He seemed relieved by my reasonable tone. "That's good to hear." For what it's worth, I pushed back against the psych eval, told them you just needed to get back to work. "I appreciate that." After he left, I pulled out my personal map of Gallatin, the one where I'd been marking historical incidents, creating a pattern of encounters stretching back more than a century, all centered around the deadfall in Eagle Creek. I had been forming a theory. The creature, the Shunka, seemed territorial, its attacks focused on those who ventured too deep into its domain. It was intelligent, adaptable, had survived decades or perhaps centuries of human encroachment. It wasn't simply a predator, it was a guardian of sorts, protecting its territory with increasing aggression as human presence in the forest grew. But there was something else, something I'd noticed in my research. The attacks seemed cyclical, clusters of incidents separated by years of relative quiet, as if the creature hibernated or perhaps migrated, returning to the deadfall periodically. If my calculations were correct, we were in the middle of an active cycle. There would be more attacks, more disappearances, unless something was done. I spent the next week on routine patrols, deliberately staying away from Eagle Creek and the deadfall, playing the role of the recovered ranger easing back into his duties. I smiled at the right moments, filed my reports promptly, and kept my theories to myself. But at night I prepared. I studied topographical maps of the deadfall, identifying potential lairs, escape routes, strategic points. I researched historical methods for hunting dangerous predators. I cleaned my personal hunting rifle, a .30-06 with more stopping power than my service revolver, and acquired ammunition designed for large, dangerous game. I wasn't planning a hunt, exactly, more a reconnaissance. I needed to understand what I was dealing with before I could determine how to proceed. If the creature was truly what the tribal legends described, it had survived centuries of human expansion, adapting and hiding. Simply charging in with guns blazing was unlikely to succeed. 3 weeks after my return to duty, an opportunity presented itself. A storm system was moving into the region, expected to drop heavy rain across Gallatin Forest. Most rangers were assigned to secure campgrounds and warn hikers off the trails. In the confusion of preparations, it was easy enough to adjust the patrol roster, assigning myself to a sector that included the eastern edge of the deadfall. I left at dawn, the sky already dark with approaching storm clouds. My official mission was to check trail conditions and post warning signs about the incoming weather. My actual purpose was something else entirely. The forest felt different as I hiked toward Eagle Creek, watchful, almost expectant. The usual chorus of birds and insects seemed muted, as if the wildlife sensed the approaching storm. Or perhaps something more ominous. I reached the spot where I'd first encountered the creature, the clearing where it had let me go. The memory was still vivid. Its unnatural stance, those two intelligent eyes, the way it had spoken. Runner, good runner. The words had haunted me for weeks. Not just the fact that it could speak, but what the words implied. It had been evaluating me, judging my performance as prey. Rain began to fall as I made my way cautiously toward the deadfall. Light drops that gradually intensified into a steady downpour. The weather worked in my favor, the drumming rain masking my footsteps, the heavy clouds casting the forest into premature twilight. Visibility was poor, but that was true for the creature as well as for me. I moved with deliberate care, rifle ready, senses strained for any sign of movement. The familiar smell of wet earth and pine was occasionally cut through by something else, that same musky, rotting odor I'd detected before. It grew stronger as I approached the tangle of fallen trees. At the edge of the deadfall, I paused, considering my next move. Going deeper into that natural maze during a storm was risky, but the weather provided cover I might not get again. I checked my radio. Still functional, though the signal would weaken among the dense trees and rough terrain. I'd told no one about my true destination today. If something went wrong, help would be hours away, if it came at all. I took a deep breath and entered the deadfall. The rain was less intense beneath the canopy of crisscross trees, but water dripped constantly from above, creating a disorienting background noise. I navigated slowly, marking my path with biodegradable tape, different from the standard Forest Service markers. If the creature was as intelligent as I believed, it might recognize the official markers from our previous encounter. An hour into the deadfall, I found the first sign. 3 parallel lines carved fresh into a pine trunk, the exposed wood still oozing sap despite the rain. I touched the marks gently. They were deep, made by something with tremendous strength and sharp claws. I continued, finding more marks every 100 yards or so, always in sets of 3. They seemed to be leading me deeper into the labyrinth, away from any established trails or landmarks. It was guiding me, or luring me. The terrain grew increasingly difficult, steep slopes covered in slick moss, narrow passages between fallen giants where I had to remove my pack to squeeze through. The rain intensified, transforming small rivulets into rushing streams that cut across my path. Then, as suddenly as I'd entered it, the deadfall opened onto a small clearing dominated by a massive lightning-struck oak. The ancient tree had been split down the middle by some long-ago storm, creating a natural shelter within its hollow core. The ground around it was bare of undergrowth, as if nothing would grow in its shadow, and there were bones, dozens of them, scattered across the clearing or arranged in unsettling patterns around the base of the oak. Mostly animal remains, deer, elk, smaller mammals, but I recognized human bones as well. A femur here, a shattered rib cage there. Some looked recent. Others had been bleached white by years of exposure. I had found its lair. My hand tightened on my rifle as I approached the hollow tree cautiously. The interior was dry despite the rain, and the smell was overwhelming. That same musky decay, but concentrated into an almost physical force. The inner walls of the tree were marked with hundreds of those 3-line symbols, carved at different heights, some fresh, others aged to near invisibility. At the back of the hollow, partially hidden in shadow, I found what remained of Jason and Miranda Holt. They had been arranged with grotesque care, limbs positioned in a bizarre parody of rest. Their faces, what was left of them, turned toward the entrance as if to greet visitors. Scraps of their clothing were woven into a strange nest-like structure that occupied much of the interior space. Within this macabre bedding gleamed personal items taken from victims, watches, jewelry, a child's toy, all arranged with disturbing precision. I backed away, fighting nausea. This wasn't simply a predator's den. This was a collection, a museum of death curated by something that remembered each kill, that took trophies and arranged them with purpose. The radio at my belt crackled suddenly, making me jump. Ellie's voice came through, broken and distorted. All Rangers. Storm warning. Flash flood. Return to stations immediately. I switched the radio off quickly, heart pounding. Had the sound carried? Had the creature heard? I got my answer moments later as a howl rose above the sound of rain, that same impossible sound that began like a wolf's call and twisted into something approximating human screaming. But this time it held a note I hadn't heard before, a note of rage. It knew I was here, in its sanctuary, among its trophies. I had seconds at most. I sprinted from the hollow tree, heading for the densest part of the deadfall. The creature would expect me to flee toward open ground, toward the trails I knew. Instead, I would go deeper, using the labyrinth against it. The howl came again, closer now, accompanied by the sound of something large crashing through the underbrush. I pushed on, ducking under fallen trunks, splashing through swollen streams, doubling back and changing direction to confuse my trail. The storm was my ally in this deadly game. The pounding rain washed away scent, the constant background noise of water masked my movements, and the early darkness provided shadow to hide in. But these advantages worked for the creature as well, and it knew this terrain intimately. I found temporary shelter beneath a fallen pine, its massive root system creating a small cave-like space. Crouching in the darkness, rifle ready, I listened for pursuit. For several minutes I heard nothing but rain and the occasional rumble of distant thunder. Then directly above me wood creaked under significant weight. Something was walking along the fallen trunk that formed my shelter, moving with deliberate slowness, stopping occasionally as if sensing my presence below. I held my breath, finger on the trigger, watching through a gap in the roots as a large clawed foot came into view. The creature was directly above me, so close I could hear its breathing. A raspy, wet sound punctuated by low growls. For an agonizing minute, it remained there, shifting its weight occasionally, sending showers of rainwater and debris through the gaps in my shelter. Then, with a sound that might have been frustration, it moved on, its footsteps fading gradually. I waited another 10 minutes before daring to move, every muscle cramped from holding still for so long. The creature had lost my trail for now, but in this weather, with night approaching, I couldn't stay hidden indefinitely. I needed to find my way out of the deadfall before darkness and the storm made navigation impossible. Checking my compass, I plotted a course that would take me toward Eagle Creek, not the most direct route back to travel trails, but one that would give me the advantage of water. The creature had shown reluctance to cross the creek during our previous encounter. It might be my best chance. I moved with painstaking care, staying low, using every bit of cover available. The rain had become torrential, transforming the forest floor into a series of muddy streams. Twice I heard the creature's call, each time more distant. It was quartering the deadfall systematically, hunting me with terrible patience. After what seemed like hours but was probably less than one, I caught the sound of rushing water ahead. Eagle Creek, swollen with rain, churning through its channel with new force. I approached cautiously, knowing the creek represented both salvation and vulnerability. I would be exposed while crossing, visible against the open water. The creek had transformed from the peaceful waterway I remembered into a churning, muddy torrent nearly twice its normal width. Crossing would be dangerous, possibly fatal if the current took me, but staying on this side meant certain confrontation with the creature. I searched for a crossing point, finding a fallen tree that spanned about 2/3 of the width. It would require a jump at the end, but seemed my best option. I was about to make my move when a sound froze me in place. Not a howl this time, but words, carried on the wind. "Runner." The voice was clearer than before, as if the creature was growing more adept at human speech. "I see you." I whirled, rifle raised, scanning the tree line. Nothing moved in the curtain of rain, but I could feel its presence, a pressure in the air, a weight of malevolent attention focused on me. "Come." The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Hungry, I backed toward the creek, keeping the rifle trained on the forest edge. My foot touched water, cold, fast-moving, my last hope of escape. Then I saw it. A shadow separating from the darkness between two massive pines. The creature emerged slowly, almost casually, rain streaming down its massive frame. In daylight, even filtered through storm clouds, it was even more terrifying than I remembered. Its body was a nightmarish fusion of wolf and human elements. The basic frame bipedal but with proportions all wrong, limbs too long and jointed in unnatural ways. Matted fur covered most of its body, but patches of pale skin showed through, stretched tight over a frame that seemed too large for its covering. The face was the worst, elongated like a wolf's muzzle but with features that suggested humanity corrupted rather than animal simplicity. And those eyes, intelligent, calculating, filled with a hatred that transcended instinct. A fresh scar ran from just below its right eye down its muzzle, where my last bullet had struck during our previous encounter. It hadn't been enough to kill it, only to mark it, to enrage it. Came back, it said. The words formed with obvious effort but unmistakable. Brave runner. I took another step back, feeling the creek's cold water rise to my ankles. What are you? I asked, the question torn from me despite the absurdity of conversing with this nightmare. The creature cocked its head, an unsettlingly human gesture on its monstrous frame. Old, it replied. Older than you, than your kind here. It gestured vaguely at the forest around us. My place. You, trespass. Despite my terror, I felt a spark of fascination. The thing was capable of abstract thought, of expressing concepts beyond immediate needs. It claimed ownership, territory. It had memory, identity. People have as much right to these forests as you do, I said. Not sure why I was engaging it in debate, but unable to stop myself. The creature made a sound that might have been laughter. No right, only strength. It took a step closer. You weak. I strong, simple. Is that why you kill? To prove you're strong? Kill to eat, kill to protect. It gestured toward the deadfall behind it. My place, marked. Clear warning. Still you come. The three-line symbols. They weren't random markings or idle destruction. They were boundary markers. Warnings that humans had ignored or failed to understand for generations. The Holts didn't know, I said. They didn't understand your markers. No excuse. The creature took another step forward, its claws flexing. Like you know. Still came. Why? I raised the rifle slightly. To stop you. To protect people who come to these forests. The creature's expression changed, the closest thing to surprise I'd seen on its inhuman features. Cannot stop. I am, always. Was here before, will be after. After what? After you. It moved suddenly, covering ground with that same unnatural speed I'd witnessed before, closing the distance between us before I could properly aim. I fired reflexively, the bullet striking the creature's shoulder with enough force to stagger it momentarily. It roared in pain and rage, a sound that seemed to shake the very air, then lunged for me with claws extended. I threw myself sideways, splashing deeper into the creek. The frigid water shocked my system, but adrenaline kept me moving. I fired again as the creature recovered its balance. Another hit, this time to its chest, but still not enough to stop it. It charged into the creek after me, seemingly forgetting its previous reluctance to cross water in its fury. The current immediately caught it, stronger than it had anticipated, pulling at its massive frame. It howled in what sounded like surprise, claws scrabbling for purchase on slick stones. Understanding dawned. It wasn't that the creature wouldn't cross water, it couldn't swim. Its unnaturally proportioned body, perhaps too dense with muscle, was not buoyant enough to navigate rushing water safely. I took advantage of its momentary struggle, firing a third time. This shot caught it in the neck, tearing through fur and flesh with devastating effect. Blood blossomed, instantly diluted by the rain and creek water, but flowing with alarming volume. The creature staggered, one clawed hand clutching its wounded neck, the other still reaching for me with murderous intent. Its yellow eyes locked with mine, and in that moment, I saw something I hadn't expected. Fear, not of me perhaps, but of what I represented. Change, encroachment, an end to its solitary reign over this corner of wilderness. Not end. It growled, as if reading my thoughts. Never end. The current caught it fully then, sweeping its wounded body downstream. It thrashed and howled, a sound that transformed from rage to something like despair as the rushing water carried it away. I stood in waist-deep water, rifle still raised, watching until it disappeared around a bend in the creek. I wanted to believe it was over, that the creature had drowned or bled out from its wounds, that Gallatin Forest was safe again, but I knew better. The legends spanned centuries for a reason. The Shunka had survived countless encounters, countless wounds. It was as it had said, always. I waded back to shore, soaked and exhausted but alive. The storm was beginning to ease, the torrential rain softening to a steady drizzle. I still had a long hike back to civilization, but the worst was behind me, or so I thought. As I gathered myself to leave, something caught my eye. Fresh marks carved into a nearby pine. 3 parallel lines, still oozing sap, but these were different. Beneath them was another mark I hadn't seen before, a simple X, a new kind of warning, a promise of retribution, or perhaps a recognition, an acknowledgement between predators who had tested each other and lived to mark the encounter. I touched the marks gently, wondering what message they conveyed, then turned and began the long walk back. The forest around me felt different now. No longer simply wilderness to be traversed and managed, but ancient territory where humans were, perhaps, only temporary visitors, where other intelligences watched from the shadows, marking boundaries we crossed at our peril. I've remained a ranger in Gallatin these past 5 years since that day. Some might wonder why I stayed after such an experience. The truth is complicated. Partly I stayed a watch to monitor reports of strange sightings or missing hikers near the deadfall. Partly because this forest is my home as much as it is the creatures, and I won't be driven from it by fear. But mostly I stay because I understand something now that I didn't before: balance. The creature and I reached an understanding of sorts that day in the storm. Territory has been respected, boundaries observed. There have been no more disappearances near Eagle Creek or the deadfall since my encounter. Sometimes, on quiet patrols near the boundaries of its territory, I catch a glimpse of movement just at the edge of vision. A shadow taller and more deliberate than any natural animal. A reminder that I am watched, evaluated, remembered. And on trees along certain remote trails, I occasionally find fresh marks, 3 parallel lines that I no longer remove or report. Instead, I add my own mark beneath them, an X that says I understand, I respect, I remember too. The wilderness holds secrets deeper and older than most could imagine. In Gallatin National Forest, something walks that defies explanation, that blurs the line between legend and reality. I know because I've seen it, I've spoken with it, I've wounded it and been let go by it. We share these woods now, the creature and I. Uneasy neighbors in a wilderness big enough for both, provided boundaries are respected. Most days, that's enough. But sometimes, when the forest grows quiet and the hair rises on the back of my neck, I still remember its words. Not end. Never end, and I wonder which of us will outlast the other in this ancient, unspoken pact. The Tongass National Forest doesn't forgive mistakes. At 17 million acres, it's the largest national forest in the United States, a sprawling wilderness that swallows people whole if they don't know what they're doing. I've spent 23 years as a ranger here, watching the forest claim those who underestimate it. But in the summer of 1999, I learned that getting lost wasn't the worst thing that could happen to you in these woods. My name is Hank Stein, born and raised in Sitka, Alaska. I was one of those kids who didn't mind the cold, didn't care much for people, and spent more time fishing than I did at school. Ended up a ranger because, well, I didn't want to deal with the noise of city life. And up here, the only noise you've got to deal with is the wind in the pines and the occasional idiot tourist who thinks they can hike through a rainforest without getting eaten by mosquitoes the size of golf balls. Our station covered the southeastern section of the forest, a remote area where the mountains meet the sea in a jagged embrace. Most days consisted of trail maintenance, wildlife monitoring, and occasionally rescuing hikers who thought their weekend camping experience made them qualified to tackle Alaska's wilderness. Routine, predictable, and exactly how I liked it, until that call came in during the first week of June. "Hank, it's Dale." The crackling voice came through my handheld radio while I was fixing boundary markers near Echo Cove. Dale Peterson worked the Misty Fjords sector, about 80 miles southeast of my usual patrol area. "What's up, Dale?" "Someone mistake a black bear for a teddy bear again," I chuckled, remembering the tourist family we'd had to extract last month after they tried to feed a 400-pound black bear their picnic leftovers. There was a pause, uncomfortably long. "Nothing like that. We've got... I don't know how to describe it, Hank. 3 hikers missing from the Silver Bow Basin Trail in the last 2 weeks. That wasn't unusual in itself. People wandered off trails all the time. But something in Dale's voice made the hairs on my neck stand up. Any search parties find anything?" I asked, suddenly serious. "That's just it. We found 2 of them." His voice dropped lower. "Or what was left of them." Dale wasn't one for dramatics. 28 years in the service, veteran of countless search and rescue operations. If something had him spooked, it wasn't just a routine animal attack. "What do you mean, what was left?" "I've seen bear attacks, wolf kills, even what happens when someone falls 100 feet onto rocks. This isn't like any of that." Dale's voice was barely above a whisper now. "The bodies were torn apart, not eaten, just destroyed. Like something was angry at them." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Alaska breeze. "You thinking it's some kind of predator? Something new moving into the territory?" The wildlife team says no. No tracks they recognize, no pattern consistent with known predators. And here's the weird part. The damage to the bodies doesn't match any bite radius or claw pattern in their database. I frowned, squinting up at the gray sky overhead. Alaska's wilderness is harsh, but it's known, cataloged, studied. We understand the threats out here, prepare for them, respect them. Unknown threats weren't part of the equation. I'm coming down, I said finally. Need a fresh set of eyes on this? Dale's relief was palpable even through the static. Could use the help. The higher-ups are talking about closing the trail, but they want confirmation this isn't just some rogue bear before they do that. Tourism dollars and all that, I snorted. Yeah, wouldn't want a few dismembered hikers to get in the way of the economy. You know how it is, Dale sighed. How soon can you get here? I'll head out first thing tomorrow. Should make it by nightfall if the weather holds. After signing off, I stood for a long moment staring at the dark line of trees that stretched before me. The forest seemed different suddenly. Not the familiar wilderness I'd spent my adult life navigating, but something older, something watching. I shook my head at my own foolishness. This job doesn't leave room for imagination. That night, as I packed my gear in my small cabin near the ranger station, I pulled out my old .45 revolver from the locked cabinet above my bed. I hadn't fired it in years, using it mainly as a deterrent for particularly aggressive wildlife. I cleaned it methodically, the familiar routine calming my inexplicably jangled nerves, before loading it and securing it in my pack. Something Dale had said kept replaying in my mind. Like something was angry at them. Animals don't get angry, not like people do. They attack for food, for territory, to protect their young. Purpose, not emotion. Whatever was happening in misty fjords, I had a feeling I wasn't prepared for it. As I drifted off to sleep, the wind picked up outside, whispering through the pines like a warning. In my dreams, I wandered through endless forest corridors, following the sound of breathing that wasn't quite human, wasn't quite animal, always just around the next bend in the trail. The next morning dawned gray and misty. Typical Alaska summer weather. I loaded my gear into my battered Forest Service truck and began the long drive around to misty fjords. The road wound through valleys shadowed by mountains that disappeared into the clouds, past glacial lakes still as mirrors. Beautiful country if you don't mind the isolation. I arrived at Dale Station just as dusk was falling, the light fading from the sky like blood draining from a wound. He was waiting on the front porch, cigarette glowing in the gathering darkness. His face more lined than I remembered from our last meeting at the regional conference. Good to see you, Hank, he said, crushing the cigarette under his boot. Wish it was under better circumstances. I nodded, grabbing my pack from the truck. Fill me in on what we know so far. Inside, Dale spread a map across the table and marked the locations where the bodies had been found. Both within half a mile of each other, both within 100 yards of the main trail. The third hiker was still missing, presumed dead. We've had rangers patrolling in pairs, Dale said, rubbing his bloodshot eyes. No one's seen anything unusual, no strange tracks, no sign of the creature, but, he hesitated. But what? Everyone who's been out there says the same thing. The forest feels wrong, too quiet. Like everything's holding its breath. I thought about my own unease the day before, staring into the tree line. You believe in ghost stories, Dale? He snorted. Used to say no. Now? He shrugged. I just want to know what's killing people in my sector. I studied the map, tracing the path of the Silverbow Basin Trail with my finger. We'll head out at first light tomorrow. See what we can find. Dale nodded, relief and something else. Fear flickering across his face. Thanks for coming, Hank. I didn't know who else to call. As I settled into the spare bunk that night, listening to the wind moan around the eaves of the station, I wondered what exactly I'd gotten myself into. 23 years in these forests, and I'd never heard that kind of uncertainty in a veteran ranger's voice before. Whatever waited for us on that trail, I had a feeling it wasn't something covered in our training manuals. Dawn broke reluctantly the next day, the sun struggling to penetrate the thick blanket of fog that had settled over the fjords. Dale and I loaded our gear in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. I checked my revolver one more time before securing it in its holster. Better to have it and not need it. The trailhead's about 20 minutes from here, Dale said as we pulled out of the station. We'll park at the maintenance access point. Fewer people that way. The drive was tense, the usual ranger banter conspicuously absent. We passed a sign for the Silverbow Basin Trail, its cheerful lettering advertising scenic views and moderate hiking difficulty. No mention of hikers being torn to pieces. You close this to the public yet? I asked, nodding at a small group of tourists unloading camera equipment from their rental car. Dale's jaw tightened. Orders are to monitor the situation. Apparently 3 casualties don't warrant immediate action. I bit back a curse. Budget cuts and politics, the twin plagues of the Forest Service. Well, let's hope we find something today that changes their minds. We parked at the maintenance access and shouldered our packs. The morning was still, unnaturally so. No birdsong, no rustling of small animals in the underbrush. Just the sound of our boots on the damp earth and our measured breathing. First body was found here, Dale said after we'd hiked about 2 miles in. He pointed to a small clearing just off the main trail. The area was marked with the remains of official tape, now drooping in the mist. I crouched, examining the ground. Despite the days that had passed, there were still dark stains on the moss and pine needles. Too much blood for a simple animal attack. This was carnage. You said no tracks were found? Dale shook his head. Nothing identifiable, some broken branches, disturbed ground, but nothing that made a clear print. Wildlife team was stumped. I stood, scanning the surrounding forest. Dense undergrowth, tall pines blocking much of the light. Perfect ambush territory for a predator. And the second victim, half-mile further, near the creek crossing. We continued on, the trail narrowing as it wound deeper into the forest. With each step I felt a growing weight in the air, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. Something was watching us. I could feel eyes tracking our movements, patient, calculating. The sight of the second attack was worse than the first. The ground was torn up as if something had thrashed violently. Broken saplings, gouges in the earth, and again, those dark stains soaked into the ground. Jesus, I muttered, crouching to examine a tree trunk nearby. 3 parallel gashes cut deep into the bark, each groove wide enough to fit my thumb. Whatever did this has some serious claws. Dale nodded grimly. That's what's got everyone confused. Those marks are too big for a wolverine. Wrong pattern for a bear. I stood slowly, unease crawling up my spine like ice water. What did the autopsy say? That's the other thing. Medical examiner couldn't determine what caused most of the wounds. Said they lacked consistency with known animal attacks. Some looked like claw marks, others like teeth, but none matched anything in their reference samples. A cold breeze whispered through the trees, carrying with it the faint smell of decay. Not just the natural decomposition of the forest floor, but something ranker, more metallic. The hair on my arm stood up. We should keep moving, I said, unconsciously lowering my voice. I want to see the whole trail before we lose the light. As we pushed deeper into the forest, the trail grew rougher, less maintained. Signs of recent human passage were evident. Boot prints in the mud, a discarded water bottle, an energy bar wrapper tucked under a rock. But still that eerie silence persisted. No wildlife, not even insects. It's like the whole forest is holding its breath, Dale murmured, echoing his words from the night before. I nodded, scanning the tree line constantly. How much further to where you think the third hiker might be? Based on their planned route, somewhere in the next mile or so. We've had search teams combing the area for days with no sign. We continued in silence, every sense straining for danger. The fog had lifted somewhat, but the forest canopy was so thick that we moved in a perpetual twilight, shadows stretching and contracting around us like living things. That's when I saw it. A flash of color against the endless green and brown. I raised my hand, stopping Dale in his tracks. There, I whispered, pointing to a splash of bright blue partially hidden by a fallen log about 30 yards off the trail. We approached cautiously, veering off the path and picking our way through the underbrush. As we got closer, the shape resolved itself into a backpack, torn and mud-stained. Its contents spilled across the forest floor. That's Martin Keller's pack, Dale breathed, recognition and dread mingling in his voice. Our missing hiker. I scanned the immediate area, looking for other signs. No blood, no obvious signs of struggle, just the abandoned backpack, as if its owner had simply vanished. Something's not right, I muttered, crouching to examine the pack more closely. The main compartment was ripped open, not unzipped. Torn fabric hung in strips, and the aluminum frame was bent at an unnatural angle. This wasn't animal scavenging, this was deliberate destruction. Dale's radio crackled suddenly, making us both jump. He fumbled it from his belt, turning down the volume. Pedersen here, he said quietly. Through the static, a voice responded. Dale, it's Sarah from base. Just checking your position. You're overdue for check-in. Dale glanced at his watch, surprise crossing his features. Lost track of time. We're about 4 miles in, at coordinate point E7. Found Keller's backpack, but no sign of him yet. Copy that. Weather report shows fog rolling back in. Might want to start heading back soon. Understood. We'll sweep another half-mile and then turn around. Peterson out. He clipped the radio back to his belt, looking apologetic. Didn't realize how late it's getting. I nodded, still examining the backpack. Something under it caught my eye. A small patch of disturbed earth. I moved the pack aside and froze. A partial handprint, pressed into the mud. Human-shaped, but too large. the fingers elongated and ending in what looked like points rather than fingertips. I gestured Dale over silently. "What the hell made that?" he whispered, crouching beside me. I shook my head, an unpleasant theory forming in my mind. "Let's keep going. I want to see a bit more before we lose the light." We continued forward, following what looked like a trail of broken undergrowth. The silence grew deeper, a physical presence pressing against my eardrums. The mist began to thicken again, tendrils of white vapor twining around the tree trunks like ghostly fingers. The trail ended abruptly at the edge of a small ravine. The drop wasn't steep, maybe 15 feet down to a shallow creek bed. But it was what was in the creek that stopped us cold. Martin Keller, or what was left of him, lay sprawled across the rocks. Like the others, his body was torn, limbs at unnatural angles, but unlike the previous victims, his body was fresh. The blood that painted the stones around him was still wet, glistening in the fading light. "Jesus Christ," Dale breathed. "This is recent. Very recent." I scanned the surrounding forest, suddenly acutely aware of our vulnerability. "We need to get back to the station, now." "But the body will still be here tomorrow," I cut him off. "Whatever did this could still be nearby. We're not equipped for that kind of encounter." Dale didn't argue. We turned and began making our way back to the trail, moving as quickly as the terrain allowed. The fog continued to thicken, reducing visibility to mere yards. Sounds were muffled, directions distorted. That's when I heard it, a soft rustling in the underbrush to our right, too deliberate to be the wind. I froze, hand moving instinctively to my revolver. Dale had heard it too. He stood perfectly still, eyes wide, scanning the white wall of fog around us. The rustling came again, closer now, circling around to our left. Something large, moving with unsettling stealth through the forest. The fog shifted, and for a brief moment I caught a glimpse of something low to the ground. Matted dark fur and a shape that wasn't quite right for any animal I knew. Then it was gone, the fog closing like a curtain. "Move," I whispered to Dale. "Back to the trail, now." We didn't run. Running would trigger a predator's chase instinct. But we moved with deliberate speed, heading directly for where we knew the main trail to be. The rustling followed, paralleling our path just out of sight. We reached the trail and I breathed a small sigh of relief. At least here we had clear footing, no branches to trip over or roots to catch our feet. "Keep moving," I murmured to Dale, who looked like he wanted to sprint. "Steady pace, don't show fear." The rustling continued to pace us through the fog, sometimes falling behind, sometimes moving ahead. Playing with us, testing us. I kept my hand on my revolver, knowing it was probably useless but taking comfort in its solid weight. As we approached the area where we'd found the second victim, the rustling stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was worse, charged with anticipation. Something was watching, waiting, deciding. "Almost to the truck," Dale whispered, his voice tight with controlled panic. "Another mile, maybe less." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Every instinct was screaming danger, a primal warning system older than conscious thought. We made it another quarter mile before I saw it again. A dark shape moving through the trees parallel to the trail, larger than before, or perhaps just closer. I could make out a hunched silhouette, something about its movements fundamentally wrong. It didn't move like any animal I knew, a jerking, fluid motion that defied natural locomotion. And then it was gone again, melting into the mist like a nightmare at dawn. By the time we reached the truck, twilight had given way to full darkness. We threw our packs in the back and climbed in, both of us breathing hard despite our measured pace. Dale's hands shook as he turned the key. "What the hell was that, Hank?" he asked as we pulled away, the headlights cutting twin cones through the darkness. I stared out the window at the receding forest, feeling eyes on us even now. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But whatever it is, it's not natural. And it's hunting." We spent that night at Dale's station, poring over maps and reports of previous incidents in the area. Sleep seemed impossible, the memory of that shadowy figure too fresh in our minds. The radio had crackled to life around midnight. Another ranger team reporting unusual silence in their sector, about 10 miles from where we'd been. "It's spreading," Dale muttered, marking the location on the map. "Whatever this thing is, it's expanding its territory." I nodded grimly, studying the pattern of incidents. Or there's more than one. The thought hung in the air between us, too terrible to contemplate further. By morning we'd made our decision. Standard procedure would be to call in a larger team, maybe even bring in wildlife experts from the university in Fairbanks. But something told me we didn't have time for bureaucracy. This thing was killing people now. and it would keep killing until it was stopped. "We go back," I said as we loaded our gear into Dale's truck. "But this time, we go prepared. In addition to our standard equipment, we each carried a shotgun, more effective than my revolver at close range, though I kept that on my hip as backup." Dale had contacted the local sheriff, arranging for a recovery team to follow us in a few hours to retrieve Martin Keller's body. The forest seemed different in the harsh light of morning, less ominous but no less quiet. The unusual silence persisted as we made our way back to the ravine where we'd found Keller. "Something's wrong," Dale said as we approached the creek bed. "The bodies moved." He was right. Keller was no longer sprawled across the rocks where we'd seen him. Instead, his remains had been dragged about 20 feet downstream, arranged in an unnervingly deliberate pattern. His limbs were splayed out, forming an X shape, his chest cavity torn wider than before. "This isn't animal behavior," I said quietly, scanning the surrounding forest. "Animals don't arrange their kills." Dale's face had gone pale. "What are we dealing with here, Hank? Some kind of psychopath using the wilderness as a hunting ground?" I shook my head slowly. "I'm not sure, but I don't think this is human. Not entirely, anyway." We photographed the scene from multiple angles, documented the position, and took samples of the surrounding soil and vegetation. Standard procedure, though I doubted any lab would be able to tell us what we were facing. "Recovery team should be here in about an hour," Dale said, checking his watch. "We should keep moving, see if we can find any sign of where this thing is coming from." I nodded, though a part of me wanted nothing more than to retreat to the safety of civilization. 23 years in these woods, and I'd never felt fear like this, a bone-deep certainty that we were being watched, evaluated, hunted. We continued upstream, following the creek deeper into the forest. The terrain grew rougher, the trail all but disappearing as we pushed through dense underbrush. The silence was oppressive, broken only by our breathing and the occasional sound of water over rocks. About a mile from where we'd found Keller, the creek bent sharply around a large outcropping of stone. As we rounded the corner, Dale froze, his hand shooting out to stop me. "Look," he whispered, pointing to the rock face ahead of us. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. The stone was marked with dozens of deep gouges, seemingly random. Then the pattern emerged, circles within circles, crude but unmistakable, carved into the rock with something sharp enough to leave inch-deep grooves in solid stone. "Those weren't made by any animal I know," Dale breathed. I stepped closer, examining the markings. They were recent, the exposed stone still light-colored where it had been carved, not yet darkened by weather and time. "This is territory marking," I said slowly, a creeping dread settling in my stomach. "Whatever this thing is, it's intelligent enough to claim space." Dale's radio crackled, making us both start. He fumbled it from his belt. "Pedersen here?" The voice that came through was garbled by static. "Dale, recovery team. Trail, no sign of..." Repeat, "No sign of the body." Dale and I exchanged alarmed glances. "Say again?" "The body is missing?" More static then. "Arrived at coordinates. Nothing here. Blood on rocks. No body. Impossible. We'd been gone less than 2 hours. For the body to be moved that quickly without us noticing anyone else in the area." "Understood," Dale replied. "Stay together, return to the trailhead. We'll meet you there." He hooked the radio back on his belt, his face grim. "We need to get back there." I nodded, but hesitated, looking back at the marked stone. "Whatever did this is still out here, and I think it knows we're looking for it." We retraced our steps quickly, alert for any sound or movement in the forest around us. The silence was complete now, not even the sound of the creek seeming to penetrate the thick atmosphere. The ravine was exactly as the recovery team had described. Blood staining the rocks, but no sign of Martin Keller's remains. It was as if the forest had swallowed him whole. "This isn't right," Dale muttered, scanning the creek bed. "There should be drag marks, blood trail, something." I climbed to higher ground, trying to get a better view of the surrounding area. Nothing moved in the endless sea of green, but as I turned to rejoin Dale, something caught my eye. A flash of unnatural color about 50 yards upstream, partially hidden by a fallen tree. "Dale," I called softly. "I think I found something." He scrambled up beside me, following my pointing finger. Without a word, we made our way toward the spot, moving as quietly as possible over the uneven ground. What we found stopped us in our tracks. Keller's remains had been positioned against the trunk of a massive pine, propped in a sitting position like a macabre puppet. But it was what surrounded the body that chilled my blood. Dozens of small objects arranged in concentric circles. Bones, teeth, camera parts, watches, rings, trophies. "My God," Dale whispered, his voice barely audible. It's collecting from its kills. I stared at the grisly display, my mind racing to make sense of what we were seeing. This wasn't animal behavior. This was something else entirely. Something that understood symbolism, that kept mementos. A crack echoed through the forest, a branch breaking under weight. We both spun toward the sound, shotguns raised. Nothing moved, but I could feel eyes on us, watching from the shadows between the trees. "We need to go," I said quietly. "Now." Dale nodded, his face ashen. "Recovery team can come back with more people. This is beyond us." We began backing away slowly, keeping our weapons trained on the tree line. The feeling of being watched intensified, a palpable pressure against my skin. That's when I saw it. A flash of movement between two pines about 40 yards away. Just a glimpse, but enough to make out a large hunched shape, moving with that same unnatural fluidity we'd seen the day before. "Run," I whispered to Dale. "Back to the trail. Go." We turned and sprinted through the forest, abandoning stealth for speed. Behind us came a sound that haunts my nightmares to this day. Not quite a growl, not quite a scream, but something in between. The sound of something that should not exist. I risked a glance back and immediately wished I hadn't. It was following us, moving through the underbrush with terrifying speed. In the dappled forest light, I could make out more details now. The massive body like a bear, but wrong somehow, too lean in places, too bulky in others. Its face a nightmare amalgamation of wolf and something else. Jaws too large, teeth jagged and uneven. "Don't look back," I shouted to Dale, who was a few paces ahead of me. "Just run." We crashed through the forest, branches whipping at our faces, roots threatening to trip us with every step. The thing behind us made that sound again, closer now, excited by the chase. We burst onto the main trail, feet pounding the packed earth as we sprinted toward the trailhead. Behind us, the creature hesitated at the edge of the clearing, as if reluctant to leave the cover of the dense forest. "It doesn't like open ground," Dale gasped as we ran. "Staying to the forest," I nodded, saving my breath for running. My lungs burned, legs screaming with the effort, but fear drove me forward. The creature paralleled our course, staying just within the tree line, occasionally visible as a dark blur of movement. We were maybe half a mile from the trailhead when Dale stumbled, his foot catching on an exposed root. He went down hard, the shotgun flying from his grasp. I skidded to a stop, turning back to help him. "Go," he shouted, waving me on as he scrambled to his feet. "I'm right behind you." But it was too late. The creature had seen its opportunity. It burst from the tree line with that impossible speed, a blur of matted fur and gleaming teeth. I raised my shotgun but hesitated, afraid of hitting Dale, who was directly in my line of fire. That moment of hesitation nearly cost us everything. The creature slammed into Dale from behind, sending him sprawling again. I fired, the sound deafening in the unnatural silence of the forest. The shot went wide, and the creature turned its attention to me. For a heartbeat we locked eyes, or what passed for eyes in that twisted face. They were black, depthless, intelligent in a way that no animals should be. It bared those jagged teeth, and I knew with cold certainty that it was enjoying this. Dale had regained his feet and retrieved his shotgun. He fired, the blast catching the creature in its flank. It jerked, snarling in pain, but didn't go down. Instead, it retreated a few steps, considering us with those terrible eyes. "Back up," I said to Dale, not taking my gaze from the creature. Slow and steady, we began retreating, keeping our shotguns trained on the hulking shape. It paced us, staying just at the edge of effective range, waiting for another opportunity. The intelligence in those eyes was the most terrifying thing of all. It was calculating, patient. It knew it had time. "What the hell is that thing?" Dale whispered as we backed away. I shook my head slightly. "I don't know, but I think it's been out here a long time." The creature continued to pace us, occasionally testing our resolve with a quick dart forward before retreating again. It was hurting us, I realized with growing horror, steering us away from the main trail, back toward the deeper forest where it had the advantage. "It's trying to cut us off from the trailhead," I murmured. "We need to make a stand or we'll never make it out." Dale nodded grimly. "On 3, we both fire. Aim for the head." I took a deep breath, steadying the shotgun against my shoulder. 1, 2, 3. We fired simultaneously, the two blasts merging into a single thunderous roar. The creature jerked violently, a ragged howl tearing from its throat. It stumbled backwards, black blood seeping from wounds in its shoulder and neck. But still it didn't fall. Instead, it regarded us with newfound wariness, those intelligent eyes calculating the threat we posed. Then, with one last hate-filled glare, it melted back into the forest, disappearing among the shadows and undergrowth. We stood frozen, waiting for it to reappear, but the forest remained still. After what felt like an eternity, Dale lowered his shotgun slightly. "Is it gone?" I shook my head. "Not gone. Retreated. There's a difference." We resumed our cautious withdrawal, staying alert for any sign of the creature's return. The remaining half-mile to the trailhead was the longest journey of my life, every shadow potentially hiding our hunter, every sound a possible attack. When we finally reached the parking area, the recovery team was waiting, their faces showing relief at our appearance. "What happened out there?" their leader asked, taking in our dirt-streaked faces and wild eyes. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Dale and I exchanged glances. "Not a ghost," I said finally. "Something worse." Back at the station, we radioed headquarters with an emergency report. Within hours, the decision had been made. The Silverbow Basin Trail would be closed indefinitely, pending investigation by wildlife experts. Too little, too late in my opinion, but at least no more hikers would wander into that thing's territory. Dale and I sat at the kitchen table, nursing cups of coffee that had long since gone cold. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving behind bone-deep exhaustion and the lingering terror of our encounter. "What do we do now?" Dale asked, his voice rough with fatigue. "Wait for the experts to arrive? That could be days." I stared into my coffee cup, thinking. The image of those black, intelligent eyes wouldn't leave my mind. That thing was out there, hunting, waiting. "I don't think we have days," I said finally. "That thing is evolving its hunting strategy. First it took isolated hikers, now it's getting bolder. And it's smart, Dale. Too smart." He nodded slowly. "So what's the alternative?" "Go back out there, just the two of us." "Three of us," came a voice from the doorway. We turned to see Sarah Blackwood, Dale's assistant ranger, leaning against the frame. She'd been listening to our conversation. "I'm coming too." Dale started to protest, but she cut him off. "I've tracked cougars in the North Cascades and wolves in Denali. Whatever this thing is, 3 guns are better than 2. I couldn't argue with her logic, though a part of me wanted to protect her from what we'd seen. But Sarah was right. We needed all the help we could get. "We go at first light," I said finally. "But this time, we're not running. This time, we hunt it." We spent the remaining hours of daylight preparing. Maps were spread across the table, possible den locations marked based on the patterns of attacks. We cleaned our weapons, packed extra ammunition, prepared first aid kits and emergency supplies. "If this thing is as smart as you say," Sarah said as she checked her rifle, "it'll know we're coming for it." I nodded grimly. "I'm counting on it. Animals that get hunted make mistakes. They panic, they break routine. And if it's not just an animal?" Dale asked quietly. "If it's something else?" I had no answer for that. We set out before dawn, the forest shrouded in pre-morning darkness. Our breath fogged in the cold air as we made our way back to the trail, headlamps cutting weak paths through the gloom. No one spoke. We'd said all that needed saying back at the station. This time we bypassed the main trail, taking a maintenance path that would bring us to the creek upstream from where we'd found Keller's body. If the creature had a den, it was likely somewhere in that area, near its gruesome trophy collection. The forest was different in the dark, more alive somehow. Shadows shifted and moved, every rustle in the underbrush a potential threat. But the unnatural silence was gone, replaced by the normal sounds of a woodland at night. The distant hoot of an owl, the scurrying of small nocturnal creatures. "It's not here," Sarah whispered as we paused to consult the map. "The forest feels normal." I nodded, scanning the darkness beyond the reach of our lights. "It's hunting elsewhere, or waiting for us." We continued on, moving as quietly as possible through the dense undergrowth. The sky gradually lightened from black to deep blue to gray, bringing with it a thin mist that clung to the ground and wound around the trees like ghostly serpents. We reached the creek just as dawn broke fully, the first rays of sunlight filtering through the canopy above. The water gurgled peacefully over smooth stones, giving no hint of the horror that had played out here just a day before. "The marking stone should be around that bend," I said, pointing upstream. "And the trophy collection was about 50 yards beyond that." Sarah nodded, adjusting her grip on her rifle. "Let's move." We followed the creek, alert for any sign of the creature. The forest remained peaceful, almost mockingly so. Birds had returned, their calls echoing through the trees. Small animals rustled in the undergrowth, undisturbed by any predator's presence. We found the marked stone exactly as Dale and I had left it, the circles within circles pattern stark against the dark rock. Sarah examined it with professional interest, careful not to touch the surface. "These markings were made recently," she confirmed, "and with something much sharper than claws. This is tool use." I nodded grimly. That's what I was afraid of. We continued to the site of the trophy collection, but found nothing. No bones, no watches, no sign that anything had ever been there. The forest had reclaimed the space, or more likely, the creature had moved its treasures to a new location. It knows we're here, Dale said quietly. It's covering its tracks. I scanned the surrounding forest, the hair on my neck rising despite the now normal woodland sounds. We need to find its den. That's where it'll retreat to when threatened. We spent the next hours methodically searching the area, looking for caves, hollows, any place a large predator might make its lair. The terrain grew increasingly rough as we moved away from the creek, the forest giving way to rocky outcroppings and steep inclines. It was Sarah who found the first clue, a path through the underbrush too regular to be made by deer or other wildlife. The vegetation was crushed and broken in a consistent width about 3 feet across. Something big moves through here regularly, she said, crouching to examine the trail. And recently, we followed the path, moving with heightened caution now. It wound through the trees, gradually ascending the rocky slope of a ridge that overlooked the creek valley. The forest thinned as we climbed, the trees becoming stunted and twisted by the constant wind at higher elevation. The path led to a narrow crevice in the rock face, barely visible unless you were looking for it. From the outside, it appeared to be a shallow cave, perhaps 10 feet deep, but as we approached, we could feel cold air flowing outward. This was no mere hollow, but an entrance to something deeper. "This is it," I whispered, adjusting my grip on the shotgun. "This is its den." Dale shone his flashlight into the opening, the beam illuminating rough stone walls that glistened with moisture. The passage narrowed beyond the entrance, then bent sharply to the right, hiding whatever lay beyond. "I don't like this," Sarah murmured. "We'd be at a severe disadvantage in there. No room to maneuver, poor visibility." I nodded slowly. "We don't go in. We wait for it to come out." We retreated to a position about 50 yards from the cave entrance, finding natural cover behind a fallen log and some large boulders. From here, we had a clear line of sight to the crevice while remaining hidden ourselves. And so we waited, the sun climbing higher in the sky, the forest going about its business around us. Hours passed in tense silence, each of us scanning the surroundings, watching for any sign of movement. "What if it doesn't come back?" Dale whispered after what felt like an eternity. "What if it has multiple dens?" I shook my head slightly. "Predators this territorial have a primary den. It'll come back eventually." But as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, doubt crept in. We'd been here nearly the entire day with no sign of the creature. Either it was unusually patient, or it wasn't coming back. "We need to make a decision," Sarah said quietly. "Stay overnight or head back before dark." The thought of being in these woods after nightfall, with that thing potentially stalking us, made my skin crawl. But the alternative, retreating only to return tomorrow, seemed equally unpalatable. "We stay?" I said finally. "But we take shifts sleeping. 2 awake, 1 resting." They nodded agreement, and we settled in for a long night. I took first watch with Sarah, while Dale tried to get some rest, his shotgun still cradled in his arms even as he dozed. The forest changed as darkness fell, the familiar daytime sounds giving way to the nocturnal chorus. Owls called from the canopy. Small creatures rustled through the leaf litter, hunting and being hunted in the eternal cycle of the wilderness. It was nearly midnight when the normal sounds abruptly ceased. One moment, the forest was alive with activity, the next, silent as a tomb. Sarah and I exchanged glances, instantly alert. "It's coming," I whispered, barely audible even in the perfect silence. We woke Dale with a gentle shake, all of us now scanning the darkness beyond our position. The moon had risen, casting silvery light through the canopy, creating a patchwork of light and shadow across the forest floor. For long minutes, nothing moved. Then, a shadow detached itself from the deeper darkness at the edge of the clearing. The creature emerged slowly, cautiously, its massive form moving with that same unnatural fluidity we'd seen before. In the moonlight, I could see it clearly for the first time. Its body was bear-like but wrong, the proportions distorted. Limbs too long, back hunched at an impossible angle. Its fur was patchy, revealing skin beneath that seemed almost scaled in places. But it was the face that defied description, a nightmare blend of wolf and something reptilian. Jaws that extended too far, teeth that curved like hooks, eyes that reflected the moonlight like black mirrors. It paused at the edge of the clearing, those terrible eyes scanning the surroundings. I held my breath, praying our cover was adequate. The creature took another step forward, its massive head swinging from side to side, scenting the air. It knows we're here, I realized with a chill. It's hunting us. The creature began circling the clearing, staying just within the tree line, those intelligent eyes constantly moving. It was cutting off our escape routes, I realized, hurting us, just as it had on the trail. On my signal, I breathed to Dale and Sarah. We all fire at once. Aim for the head and chest. They nodded, raising their weapons with infinite care to avoid any sound or sudden movement. The creature completed its circuit of the clearing and stopped, directly facing our position. Those black eyes seemed to lock onto mine, as if it could see straight through our cover. Its jaws parted, revealing rows of those hook-like teeth, and it made a sound. Not quite a growl, not quite a laugh, but something in between. Now! I shouted, rising to one knee and firing in a single motion. 3 shots rang out simultaneously, the sound deafening in the silent forest. The creature jerked backward, black blood spraying from wounds in its chest and shoulder. But it didn't go down. Instead it roared, a sound so alien, so wrong, that it seemed to pierce directly into my brain, bypassing my ears entirely, and then it charged. I fired again, the shotgun bucking against my shoulder. Beside me, Dale and Sarah did the same, a continuous barrage that should have stopped anything living. The creature staggered under the impact but kept coming, covering the distance between us with terrifying speed. It hit our position like a freight train, smashing through the log we'd been using as cover. I rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding being crushed. Sarah wasn't as lucky. The creature's massive paw caught her across the chest, sending her flying into a nearby tree with a sickening thud. "Sarah!" Dale screamed, firing again at point-blank range. The shot tore into the creature's flank, eliciting another of those mind-piercing roars. It whirled, faster than anything that size should be able to move, and lunged at Dale. He tried to dodge, but the creature's jaws clamped onto his arm, those hook-like teeth sinking deep. I scrambled to my feet, firing again, aiming for the creature's head. The shot connected, tearing away a chunk of its misshapen skull. It released Dale, who collapsed to the ground, blood pouring from his mangled arm. The creature turned to me, those black eyes now filled with something beyond animal rage, hatred, intelligent and focused. It charged again, and I fired my last shot, the blast catching it full in the chest. The impact staggered it momentarily, but didn't stop its advance. I dropped the empty shotgun and drew my revolver, knowing it was woefully inadequate against this nightmare. The creature loomed over me, its hot breath washing over my face, reeking of decay and something chemical, almost metallic. I fired the revolver point-blank into its throat, the bullet tearing through flesh and sinew. Black blood sprayed across my face, burning like acid where it touched my skin. The creature made a choking sound, more fluid gushing from the wound in its throat, but still it didn't fall. One massive paw rose, claws extended to tear me apart just as it had the hikers. I fired again and again, emptying the revolver into the creature's body. Finally, it staggered backwards, those intelligent eyes clouding with something like surprise. It made one last attempt to lunge at me, but its legs gave out and it collapsed to the forest floor with an impact I could feel through my boots. For a long moment, I stood frozen, waiting for it to rise again. But the creature lay still, that terrible life fading from its eyes. With its last breath, it made a sound almost like speech, a garbled, inhuman attempt at communication that chilled me more than any animal sound could have. Then it was still. I rushed to check on Dale and Sarah. Dale was conscious but in shock, his arm mangled beyond anything a first aid kit could address. Sarah was worse, unconscious, breathing shallow, probably internal injuries from being slammed into the tree. "We need to get them out of here," I muttered to myself, looking from my injured companions to the massive corpse on the forest floor. Using the emergency transponder from my pack, I called for immediate evacuation. Then I set about doing what I could for Dale and Sarah while we waited for rescue. As the adrenaline faded, I found myself drawn back to the creature's body. In death, it seemed even more unnatural. A biological impossibility that defied classification. Not bear, not wolf, not anything that should exist in these woods or anywhere on Earth. Its blood was already congealing, turning from liquid to a gel-like substance that captured the moonlight in ways no natural blood would. I didn't touch it, remembering the burning sensation where it had splashed my face. Whatever this thing was, it didn't belong here. And I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't the only one of its kind. The rescue team arrived at dawn, a helicopter setting down in a small clearing nearby. As the medics rushed to attend to Dale and Sarah, I pulled the team leader aside. "There's something else you need to see," I said, leading him to the creature's body. He stopped dead when he saw it, face draining of color. What the hell is that thing? I shook my head slowly. I don't know. But it killed at least 3 hikers that we know of, and nearly killed us. He stared at the corpse, professional training warring with primal fear. I'll call this in. We'll need a special team for that. I nodded, watching as they loaded Dale and Sarah onto stretchers. Both would live according to the medics, though Dale might lose the arm. A small price to pay considering what we'd faced. As the helicopter lifted off, carrying my wounded companions to safety, I turned back to the creature's body one last time. In the harsh light of morning, it looked almost pitiful, a broken collection of mismatched parts never meant to exist together. But those eyes, even in death, held a malevolent intelligence that haunted me. And as I followed the recovery team back down the mountain, I couldn't shake the feeling that our nightmare was far from over. 6 months passed. The official story was simple. A previously unknown species of bear, deformed by disease or birth defects, had been responsible for the hiker deaths. The body had been taken to a research facility for study, the results classified due to potential public panic. The Silverbow Basin Trail remained closed indefinitely. Dale recovered slowly, keeping his arm but losing most of its function. Sarah fared better physically, though the nightmares kept her from returning to fieldwork. Both took desk positions with the Forest Service, their days in the wilderness behind them. I stayed on as a ranger, though I requested transfer to a different sector of the Tongass, as far from misty fjords as possible. The higher-ups were happy to grant it, eager to have the whole incident fade from memory, but I couldn't forget. Those intelligent eyes haunted my dreams, that almost speech in the creature's final moments playing on an endless loop in my mind. I spent my free time researching, digging through old reports of strange sightings in the area, Aboriginal legends, anything that might give me answers. What I found disturbed me more than the encounter itself. Stories stretching back centuries passed down through Tlingit and Haida tribes, of a shape-shifting creature that stalked the deep forests. Frontiersmen's journals describing attacks by devils that walked like men but moved like beasts. And more recently, classified reports of strange radiation readings in the area following a Soviet satellite crash in the late 1960s. I kept my findings to myself, knowing they'd sound like the ravings of a man traumatized by his experience. But I remained vigilant, watching the forest with new eyes, always alert for signs that another of those things might be out there. Winter came to Alaska, harsh and unforgiving as always. The short days and long nights limited my patrols, forcing me to stay closer to the ranger station than I would have liked. But in some ways, the winter was a relief. The snow would show tracks clearly, make it harder for anything large to move undetected. It was during a routine patrol in early March, checking boundary markers along the eastern edge of my sector, that I found the first sign. Tracks in the fresh snow, unlike any animal I recognized. Too large for wolf, not right for bear, with a strange gait that suggested something moving on all fours but occasionally rising to 2 legs. I followed the tracks for nearly a mile before they disappeared at the edge of a frozen lake. Either the creature had crossed the ice, leaving no tracks, or it had noticed it was being followed and deliberately obscured its trail. The second sign came 2 weeks later, a moose carcass, torn apart in the same distinctive way as the human victims had been, not eaten, just destroyed, as if in rage or for sport. I reported it as a normal predator kill, not wanting to raise alarms, but I knew better. It had begun again. I started carrying my shotgun on every patrol, kept the revolver on my hip at all times. The other rangers noticed, but said nothing. They'd heard rumors about what happened at Misty Fjords, gave me a wide berth when the subject came up. By April, the snow was beginning to melt, making tracking more difficult. But I'd mapped enough sightings and strange kills to establish a pattern. Whatever this new creature was, it was gradually moving south, following the same ridgeline where we'd found the first one's den. I knew I should report it, call in backup, do things by the book this time. But the memory of Sarah's broken body and Dale's mangled arm held me back. I couldn't risk anyone else. This was my fight now. On a cold, clear night in late April, I set out alone, against all regulations and common sense. I'd pinpointed what I believed to be the creature's hunting ground, a remote valley about 10 miles from my station, rarely visited even by rangers due to its difficult terrain. I hiked in before dawn, setting up a blind on a ridge overlooking the valley. From here, I could see the game trails where the creature would likely pass, while remaining hidden myself. Or so I hoped. The day passed slowly, the sun climbing and then beginning its descent without any sign of my quarry. I began to wonder if I'd miscalculated, if the pattern I'd pieced together was just coincidence and paranoia. Then, as twilight deepened the shadows in the valley, I saw it. moving with that same unnatural fluidity as the first, but different, sleeker, faster, its movements even more wrong somehow. In the fading light, I could make out the same general shape, the hunched back, the elongated muzzle, the two long limbs, but this one seemed more adapted, more refined, as if it were an evolution of the creature we'd killed. It moved along a game trail below my position, head swinging from side to side, scenting the air. It paused suddenly, raising its muzzle toward my hidden position. I held my breath, shotgun ready, praying the wind wouldn't shift and carry my scent to it. For a long moment it stood frozen, those same intelligent black eyes scanning the ridge where I was concealed. Then it continued on, disappearing into a stand of pines at the far end of the valley. I waited until full dark before moving, following the same path the creature had taken. The moon was nearly full, providing enough light to track by without using my flashlight, which might give away my position. The stand of pines gave way to a rocky slope, barren except for a few stunted trees clinging to cracks in the stone. The creature's tracks led straight up, toward what appeared to be a narrow fissure in the rock face, another den, just like the first one. The similarity was too great to be coincidence. These creatures, whatever they were, sought out the same type of shelter. I approached cautiously, shotgun at the ready, every sense straining for danger. The entrance was smaller than the first den had been, barely large enough for the creature to squeeze through. There was no way I could follow it inside, a realization that brought both relief and frustration. How was I supposed to kill it if I couldn't reach it? The answer came to me as I surveyed the surrounding area. The fissure appeared to be the only entrance, the rock face solid on all sides. If I couldn't go in after it, I would force it to come out. I retreated to a safe distance and began gathering what I needed: dead branches, dry brush, anything that would burn. By midnight, I had amassed a substantial pile at the entrance to the fissure. Using accelerant from my emergency kit, I soaked the material thoroughly. Before lighting it, I positioned myself on an outcropping about 30 yards from the entrance, with clear lines of sight and fire. The shotgun was loaded with slugs rather than buckshot. I wanted killing power, not spread. Taking a deep breath, I struck a flare and tossed it onto the fuel-soaked pile. It caught immediately, flames leaping high, casting writhing shadows across the rock face. Thick smoke began pouring into the fissure, drawn inward by the natural airflow of the cave system. I didn't have to wait long. Less than 5 minutes after the fire started, I heard it, that same unearthly, not quite growl from deep within the fissure. The creature knew it was trapped, and it was angry. When it burst from the entrance, it came with explosive force, a blur of motion too fast to track. The flame seemed not to affect it as it leaped through, landing several yards clear of the fire in a single bound. It whirled, those black eyes reflecting the firelight, searching for the source of its torment. I didn't hesitate. The moment it cleared the flames, I fired, the slug catching it in the shoulder, spinning it halfway around. It roared, that mind-piercing sound that vibrated through my bones, and located me instantly. I fired again as it charged, the shot hitting center mass but barely slowing it. This one was faster than the first, more resilient. It covered the distance between us in seconds, leaping for the outcropping where I stood. I dove to the side, rolling as I hit the ground, coming up with the shotgun still gripped in my hands. The creature landed where I had been, claws scraping on stone as it wheeled to face me. We faced each other across 10 yards of rocky ground, the firelight casting its monstrous shadow across me. In that moment, I saw the differences more clearly. This creature was more streamlined, its limbs more proportional, its movements more fluid. It was an improved version, adapted for greater speed and killing efficiency. Evolution shouldn't work that fast. Whatever these things were, they weren't natural. It charged again, and I fired my third shot, aiming for the head. The slug tore into its skull, black blood spraying in an arc that gleamed oddly in the firelight. But still it came, seemingly impervious to wounds that would have dropped any natural animal instantly. I had time for one more shot before it reached me. I fired point blank at its chest, the impact finally staggering it, but its momentum carried it forward, crashing into me, sending us both tumbling across the rocky ground. Pain exploded through my body as I hit stone, the shotgun torn from my grasp. The creature recovered faster, looming over me, those hook-like teeth bared. One massive paw pinned my chest, claws digging into flesh even through my heavy jacket. I reached for my revolver, but the creature was too fast, its other paw swatting my hand away with enough force to numb my entire arm. It lowered its head, that terrible mouth opening wider than any natural jaw should be able to, preparing for the killing bite. In desperation, I grabbed the flare gun from my belt, my last, feeble defense. As the creature's jaws descended, I shoved the flare gun into its mouth and pulled the trigger. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The flare ignited inside the creature's throat, fire erupting from its mouth and nostrils. It reared back, releasing me, clawing at its own face as if trying to extinguish the flames from within. I rolled away, scrambling for the shotgun, which lay several yards distant. By the time I reached it and turned, the creature was thrashing on the ground, internal fire visible through cracks that had opened in its skin, black blood boiling as it poured from the wounds. I approached cautiously, shotgun trained on the writhing form. The creature's movements were weakening, the fire consuming it from the inside out. Those intelligent eyes found mine one last time, filled with hatred and something else, recognition. It knew me, not just as prey, but as the one who had killed its kind before. And in its dying moments it did something that still chills my blood when I remember it. It spoke, not in any human language, but in sounds that were unmistakably words, a guttural, clicking speech that no human throat could produce. Then it was still, the fire within it gradually dying, leaving behind a charred husk that barely resembled the creature it had been. I stood over it until dawn, shotgun ready, unwilling to believe it was truly dead until I'd seen it motionless for hours. When the first light of morning touched the valley, I began the long hike back to my station. I reported finding a burned animal carcass, probably a bear caught in a natural fire caused by lightning. No one questioned it, they had no reason to. That was 3 years ago. I still work as a ranger in the Tongass, though I've requested transfers twice more, always moving further from the area where it all began. I tell myself it's over, that the creatures are gone, that life can return to normal. But on cold, clear nights when the wind whispers through the pines, I find myself scanning the tree line, watching for that fluid movement in the shadows, listening for that almost speech that haunts my dreams, because I know the truth that the official reports hide, the reality that lies behind the closed trails and classified studies. Those things weren't natural, they were something else, something that doesn't belong in our world. And I can't shake the feeling that they were just the beginning. My name's Hank Stein, and I used to think I'd seen just about everything this world could throw at me. Now I know better. Now I know that everything includes things that should not exist. Things that watch from the shadows with intelligent eyes, waiting for their moment to emerge. I keep my shotgun loaded these days, and the revolver never leaves my hip. Because deep in the Tongass National Forest, in the endless wilderness of Alaska, something waits that doesn't follow nature's rules. Something that learns, adapts, evolves at an impossible rate. And if you ever find yourself on a remote trail, surrounded by the silence of a forest that should never be silent, remember my warning. You are not the apex predator here. You are not in charge. And if you hear branches breaking behind you, don't look back. Just run. Because some things, once seen, can never be unseen, and some nightmares follow you out of the forest, into the waking world, where they wait in the shadows of your mind, patient as only true predators can be, patient and hungry, and very, very real.